I hope that you are like me. Though we owe no allegiance to anybody but God, we do still have a fidelity towards our country. When we think about the flag, when we see it, it represents two things, really three. It represents the people and the border. Obviously, the people and the border come together, and there's a history. I don't think that there's any other country on the planet quite like ours. Do I think it's perfect? Without question. There are people here who are over 50 with hair. Can't be perfect, but we still love our country. We love our neighbors. We want to have a place where our children are safe, where our spouses are safe, that we hope that there is a future until the Lord delays his return for our grandchildren and so forth. And so, what we want to do is, for the last time, let's just take a deep breath. For the last time, until 4 years later, we won't talk about politics, hopefully. So, what we'll do is we'll just kind of talk about what is pertinent for people that are voting, have voted, or will vote. Even though we are diverse in our backgrounds and our opinion, I want to go ahead and bring our panel on. These our gentlemen who love the Lord, who are also going to give their opinions on a variety of topics. And so let me go ahead and first introduce these gentlemen. At your very top left-hand corner, we have Nick from Bible Dingers. And as a matter of fact, we have a Bible Dinger sandwich because right in between Ryan on the right of Bible Dingers, we have our brother Damon Richardson. Then obviously the two men here with the wait a second, where is Walter Jones? Doggone it, hold on, wait, there it is. There it is. I'm sorry. He's at
Oh,
now I
yeah.
missed the whole sandwich up. Now at your top left hand corner, we have
That's
Sir Walter Jones. And then obviously to the bottom right, you see me. And then the person with the second best hairdo is Virgil Walker. Many of you know him. The gentleman right beside him, Alana, you don't have a channel, do you? I don't think you do. Uh,
No, no, I do not.
but you guys have probably seen him in the chats, and so I invited him on. He has a different perspective than obviously than I do, at least on some things. I'm not sure what totally, and so I wanted to bring him on as well. And so, gentlemen, just really briefly, so we can go ahead and get into it. How are you all doing?
very
Very
well.
good.
Thanks for asking.
You all should have
Good.
heard them counting. I asked, this is going to go off the rails real quickly. I asked them to count, and I think only one person counted correctly, just one person. So we don't have problems. But anyway, I want to go ahead and jump into things, and I want to start off this way. And by the way, we have a little bit of a format, but not of a set way how we're going to do this. But what would you guys say is probably the most important thing to think of or for a Christian who either has voted or will vote or is planning on voting real soon? What do you guys think? And anyone at y'all decide who wants to go first. But what's probably the most important thing to consider? Not necessarily an issue, but it could be an issue or a thing to consider when going to vote.
I can start.
Say that again.
Well,
Uh, I
oh,
can
go
start.
ahead.
I believe that the most important issue is to ask ourselves, how am I representing Christ?
Amen.
That
Amen.
is as simple as that.
Okay. Alon says, how are we representing Christ? I'm pretty sure a lot of us would agree with that. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say to respect the vote, the privilege to vote is I might call it a sacred privilege, but it is a privilege, and many other forms of government in the ancient world did not have that. There's no parallel to it in the ancient Near East, um, Rome in the biblical times, first, second century, third century on. Um, the emperor was not elected. The Senate was not elected. They were appointed. So voting is a privilege, and I think we ought to remember that, and we ought to respect that privilege of voting, not just that we have it, but that others have it as well.
Amen. Amen. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think the most important aspect of this election is basically brings us back to the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. We have to ask ourselves this most important question, and that's what is the best way for us as Christians to bring God glory? And I think that's the question we need to start with all of these topics.
Okay. Ryan, Virgil, Walter.
I thought the guys covered it pretty well. I think having and holding a biblical worldview, having a solid foundation of what the scriptures say about the issues that matter, having having that well rounded as you go in to vote, I think is important. I think having it long before, not the least of which to vote, but definitely as it pertains to this particular issue, this time of year, this season that we have, it's important to have a biblical view about all the issues that really matter.
Ryan
Yeah, and
or Walter?
I would just jump in there, and it could almost be used as a summary. Even is that you're a Christian first, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or Independent or whatever you call yourself. Before you're any of those things, you're a Christian. So you need to keep that in mind when you're sorting through the policies that you're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with all of the brothers. I think that we are ambassadors for Christ first. And I know that you hear from the media that we coined the phrase conservative right, but there are millions of Christians in the Democratic Party because the black church, the word church is in there, and many of them, if not most of them, vote Democrat, but yet we call it the conservative right. Yet there is no such thing as a conservative left. And I think the conservative part is the values or the policies and not so much the church. And so I agree with the brothers. However, which way you vote, you got to look at our purpose as being ambassadors, because when you look in the Old Testament, you see how God continued to punish the Israelites for not being hospitable and not taking care of the needy and the poor and perverted justice and all these things. And if you can see the antithesis of that in whichever party that you're voting for, then maybe you're voting wrong.
So what I want to do then, I want to ask a question, something that Damon said about it being a privilege to vote. Do you guys see, and Damon, you can start off this or anyone else, but do you guys see, though, as a privilege to vote, do you also think it is an obligation for us as believers to vote? In other words, you'll hear people say that we are not called to be representatives or to represent this secular society, but at the same time, though, if there's a voice that needs to be heard, should it be the Christians? And so, where do you all stand? Should we vote?
I would say we should. We don't necessarily have an obligation to do it as though it is a necessary responsibility for a citizen, but it is something that a citizen should do, particularly to take part in what actually shapes policy, and the very fact that we are all affected by policies, legislation, decisions. We complain about these things. We talk about these things. Well, one way that we can participate in how these things turn out, the outcome of issues that are important to us, is to exercise a vote. So I think in one way to be responsible as a citizen is to participate, although it's not an obligation or a necessity. I think it is one way that we can steward our citizenship by making sure that our voices are heard, that we actually do participate.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would gracefully disagree. Obviously, we're open to discussion here. It wouldn't be interesting if we didn't stir the pot a little bit from the get-go, right? I do think it's an obligation, because my question would be, when is it not an obligation for a Christian to do all that they can to do things the godly way and to help the needy? When we get back to true religion, is to feed the needy, to help the orphan, to help the widow, and all of that falls into um, exercising true religion. And true religiosity is not just one in our mind or the knowledge that we bring to the table, but it's the actions, how we are being image bearers of Christ and how we are serving others and loving them And I think it is an obligation, because if we just sit back on our couch and just say, well, good luck, it's not really exercising the liberty that we have. And if God has put us on this earth to do the best we can, we should.
So you're saying we should vote?
I think it's an obligation. I think it totally.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think it's a salvation issue, obviously, and I don't think
Mhm.
you're in sin if you don't. I'm not going to say you need to repent, but what I'm saying is that it is an obligation. We should be, and we have to be doing all that we can to help the needy and to
Okay.
exercise true religion.
So let me say it this way. Let me change it a little bit. Should we vote? Are we, if we are going to complain about what's happening, then are we obligated to vote then? In other words, all the things that we say that encroach upon us as believers or just anybody, then if we're going to complain, then are we obligated? Should we vote? Are we obligated then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Again,
mean, it's like,
go ahead.
go ahead, brother. Go ahead, brother.
No,
Go ahead, Walter.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that the answer lies into Paul's statement of alluding to all things are acceptable, but all things are not expedient. I think it would be unhealthy not to vote, especially being an African American where my father's died, my mother's died, so that I might have the right. So to not vote is almost spitting in their faces, and I don't care. But I will say in history, many millions of evangelicals didn't vote because they felt it was not an obligation. They just wanted to deal with the segregation issue, and they went to the South and built their schools and their churches and what have you, and they kept minorities out. It wasn't until the rally for Ronald Reagan that they decided to come together through the moral majority to vote. And then once they started to vote, then it became an obligation. So today, because we're so divided, we now insist that it's an obligation because of our division.
Okay. So I want to ask this question, or let me say this first. Are we really that divided? And I think I'm not sure, was it you, Walter, or was it might have been Damon, that we were speaking about kind of the past rhetoric. And let me just rattle some things off to people who don't know what I'm talking about. We've always been a country where we've had some vitriol towards an opposing view. For example, let me just read. Poor John Adams, he gets the brunt of this, or Alexander Hamilton as well. But Aaron Burr actually killed Alexander Hamilton in 1804. John Adams called Alexander Hamilton a bastard brat of a Scotch peddler. The Detroit Free Press called Ulysses S. Grant a drunk or a drunkard. We had one particular presidential candidate being called, Franklin Pierce, being called the pimp of the White House. The Cincinnati Post-Gazette called Andrew Jackson's mother a prostitute, and that he was a child of a hooker. Thomas Jefferson called John Adams a hermaphrodite. We have presidents that were called products of incest. One, I forget which one, it escapes me right now. But one particular president's candidate called another one, said that he was found to be engaged in bestiality, being found having had sex with a family dog and goat. And so we see these things that have happened in the past. As a matter of fact, you think about the 60s, where we had 4 prominent political figures assassinated. We hadn't had that before. And we had more riots in the 60s than we had even in the Summer of Love. And so the question is, are we as divided, or are we just bringing up how divided we are or are we just making more of certain things? Are we making more of people's words and character traits and things like that? Whereas in the past, we did not consider those as much. Or no, Corey, you're wrong. We're even more divided now than ever before.
It's a good question, a good historical look, looking back. But I think what we are not seeing is the thing that we don't do every 2 years, and that is vote in the midterm elections. That is where you see the division, because the men and women that's in Congress as a representatives of how you voted, who you are, bipartisanship was the soup du jour of days of old. How do you think Richard Nixon decided to resign? It was because both sides said, you need to go. Not just one. If Trump, in the climate that we're in today, was in 1970, 2 or 3, with the climate we have today, there was no way he would resign, and the impeachment may not even work. I mean, we impeached him twice, but yet where did he go? He continued to serve.
Mhm.
So I think the division, as far as civility is concerned, is among the people. Well, yes, those examples you use with those presidential candidates, they had to do that. That was just the way they did it. But when it came to the three branches of government, I believe that they're more divided today than they have ever been in American history, at least since the Civil War.
Okay. Anyone else?
Correct. That's I would say that we are more divided today than ever, and that's because division is being used as a political tool to get people to vote. And you can see that by going, for example, in the various forums. What people emphasize, what people talk about, is more what divided us. That is what divides us than what brings us together. And you have, social media, the internet is just exacerbating that process.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think the major cause of the greatest division we've ever seen has been COVID, because COVID revamped the media, where they realized that these fear tactics can actually drive a nation to insanity. And now that's what both of these political parties have done. They want to show the most corrupt and extreme parts of each other and hope to scare the person in voting to the other side, because they realize that mass control of people's emotions works. And I think we've never seen such great division right when COVID ended, and right in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. We saw this new type of media, especially on social media, that we have never seen in the history of America.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I
See, I
think
think.
the true
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
division,
Go ahead.
the true division started in 2008 when Barack Obama started running for president. That's where it started. And I boldly say that if there was no Barack Obama, there wouldn't be a Donald Trump as president.
I think this is me. As I go back and look, and I remember this. This was my very first major before I changed it. No, I'm sorry. My first major was architecture. My second major was political science. And I was a card-carrying member of the Democratic Party. Why? Because doggone it, that's what I was supposed to be. And I remember we were going through just looking at elections from the beginning of time. And obviously, this was Clinton wasn't even the president yet. George H.W. Bush was the president. But up until that time, we've pretty much had close elections throughout the history of America. And it's always been one particular party with its nemesis. And the same today. We've always been almost 50-50, and you've had the intellectual elites on both sides. You have the people who absolutely have no idea what's happening on both sides. I'm a Democrat because I don't know why. I'm a Republican. I don't know why. And then those that are somewhat abreast of what's happening. And so to me, it just seems like maybe we're not. Maybe it's just being fleshed out because we've had almost the same number of this party's president as that party in power. And so we just go back and forth, back and forth. But that being the case, if we are divided, and we are divided, but what causes us, not just obviously the media highlighted, but what are the issues? What are the things that make us the most divided? And this is kind of how we start going into some of the topics. And this is kind of where we maybe salivate a little bit or, get a little bit more into it. But what are the issues you guys think that make us divided?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll jump in here and just simply say this. I disagree with the men on the panel that this is the most divided time. I think there are times in history we have a tendency to think in short bursts of 30, 40 years or whatever our time frame is. I mean, you think about a more divided time in American history couldn't have been any more divisive than at the time, right? During the Civil War, where people were literally taking out weapons and firing at their countrymen. And so There have been more divisive times in American history, even in American political history. The reality is, I think, given our day and time, what we're examining and speaking and experiencing, due in no small part to social media, is we're seeing it up front and close and personal more often. So we have access to it. I can see what someone says now, rather than a musket and a gun. I'm looking at tweets, and I'm concerned about if someone said something derogatory on a tweet, folks getting their feelings hurt, that kind of thing. So we're dealing with massive issues on a much smaller scale, but the scale has increased in that there's a proliferation of it. I now get to see what thousands of people are saying, or whatever my social media footprint looks like over the course of a given day, and so I've got access to more. And so for me, my personal experience, it would seem like we're more divided ideologically. There is division. I think that will always be. There'll always be camps and tribes and folks that agree and disagree and what have you. And I rather than seeing that as a negative, I think that's actually healthy. So long as we're respectful of one another and can dialogue and interact in a way that's biblical and God honoring. And by that, I don't mean without passion. That people have a tendency to think that saying biblical and God honoring means you're not passionate about your position. I think there can be passion with that, but at the same time, we can see one another as brothers in the Lord.
Okay, so let me ask this: we agree that that there's division, whether we are the most divided ever or what have you. But let's look at the times where we seem to have the division has turned violent or more ramped up. Does it seem to always coalesce around something that is moral? For example, slavery. Well, that's why we're fighting. As it relates to war, the Vietnam War, and I would say the first two world wars, we were probably more we had more solidarity as a country. But the civil rights movement, there seemed to be, or Reconstruction, there seemed to be issues relating to morality at the time that caused more division. But then something would happen that would kind of galvanize us and bring us together for a short moment. But right now, aren't there some issues that are causing us to be even more so morally outraged, especially as Christians? And so you all know where I'm going. Do we as Christians need to be divided with the world or the secular world as it relates to some of these moral issues that we find in the Bible, such as the trans issue, the alphabet, the LGBTQ issues, and abortion? Are those things that are worthy for us to be divided over, or is it just one or two issues amongst the many things?
Well, I don't think that society has changed much, and let me reiterate what I said earlier about this to answer this question, because I did reference the Civil War, and I said since. I think the difference, and I think the brother, I think he was absolutely correct about us only going so far out, so many years, and then that is the basis of our decisions on this is what's going on because of our recent historical. We stop at a certain place. I think the problem is access. We have access to media, social media, 24-hour cable news. During the time of Walter Cronkite, they were not opinionated news. They just reported the news as they saw it. And it wasn't until the people began to see the news as not giving them enough. It didn't happen until the man says, "Have you no decency?" Because the senator was saying that all these people were communists in Hollywood and what have you, and he had no proof of that. And when the other senator went against him, said, "You have no decency," then the media had to change and say, okay, we need to, since this man was so bold to say this, now we need to be bold. And then came a lot of the pundits that are opinionated media. So now we have access to all of this opinions coupled with our opinions, and now it seems like we're more divided, but I don't think we have changed. I think we're the same, but somebody just threw something in a room full of people, and then you can tell that people were swimming naked, like the brother mentioned COVID. You didn't realize how bad you were off until COVID came. You realized that you didn't have enough money saved up for an emergency. You realize how bad your immune system was. you realize, churches realize how much they didn't save up to save their churches and to help the people that's in that. So COVID did stir up what was already there. It didn't cause, it just showed us what was already there. So we see bigotry and racism and all these things. It was always in the fabric of America. And so when we're fighting based off of what's already there, and all I needed to do was press the button. It's access.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, I'll mention this. I think division it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think Christians will always be divided over political issues. I think the problem is that when we start dividing as Christians, right? So if our division is more political, that's fine. But if my difference, how I understand or how I am convicted, where my political values may be, if that's different from you, but you're my brother or you're my sister, around all of the essential issues of the Christian faith, then no, we should not be divided as Christians. But it is okay to be ideologically and even politically divided in terms of what issues are really most important to us. There's no single set of issues that are going to stack rank the same way for all Christians. Even if they're all important to us, where we stack them and rank them are going to differ. So for some Christians, I get it. Abortion's the number one issue, but not for every Christian. And that doesn't mean it's not an important issue for them.
That's
and
right.
I think when we attempt to control how other Christians stack rank the issues that are important to them, so that it is exactly numbered in priority as mine, and then we start making decisions and determinations about whether or not, how could you even be a Christian if it, that's wrong. And that kind of division is tribalistic, it's ungodly, it's exactly what Paul was after in his missive to the Corinthians. The guiding question in his letter was, is Christ divided? If you read the entire letter of Paul with that question in mind, every attempt of Paul to address an issue in the Corinthian church that was threatening division begs the question, the rhetorical question, is Christ divided? And if not so, then neither should we be. And I think we've got to remember that am I of Apollos? Am I of Peter? Am I of Paul? And Paul was vehemently against this kind of tribalism. And we have essentially succumbed to that politically and ideologically as Christians. And again, as the dear brother said earlier, we can passionately and vigorously disagree over a number of things, but when we start dividing as Christians over some of these issues, I think we've got to be really careful about the nature of those divisions. If it goes beyond just mere political differences or ideology, and we make these things more essential than they are, then we can easily fall into the slippery slope of political idolatry.
My brother, my oldest brother, is as left leaning as they can get. He would vote for Harris 12 times if he could. Matter of fact, because he's on the left, he probably has already if he's listening. So, but I love him. I love him to death, and we have to set a rule. We're not going to talk about politics because we'll be on the phone for 2 hours, get nowhere. He just called to ask how the kids were. So I hear what you're saying. We've got to, at the very least, if we disagree, know how to disagree and still remain brothers, still remain committed to each other's well-being, for the sake of the Lord. But that being said, I want to go ahead and throw a bomb in the middle of all of this. I would love to know what you all's number one issue is for you when it comes to voting. If I could ask that question, I would love to know of all the issues, what would you, if you could have everyone vote the way you voted or think the way you think, or just tell us what is your main issue for you that drives you. Maybe it's not one, maybe it's two or three. And so, by the way, let me do this because some folks are coming in, they're asking who's who. So let me just reintroduce everyone else. At the bottom left hand of your corner, and at the top middle, we have Ryan and Nick, both from Bible Dingers. Right beside Ryan, to the right of your screen, we have our brother Alon M. You all have seen him in the chats before. To the right of him, you have the guy with the second best haircut on YouTube. That is Virgil Walker. His haircut's second only to mine. Then right above me, we have Brother Damon Richardson, who, by the way, we both have to repent because we both have planned on, y'all don't know about this, but we plan to do harm to somebody. Can't tell you who it is. We plan to meet up and do some harm to somebody, but that's Brother Damon Richardson. You see all the books behind him, and he's read or written all of those. And then over there, sinisterly sipping his drink, we've got Sir Walter Jones, who quick fact, he was there to teach Moses how to tie his shoe. So that being the case, let's go ahead and jump back in this. So I would like to know, and since Nick, you left out and came back in, what is your number one issue? If you could say that, hey, listen, I'm telling you, this should be your top issue when it comes to voting.
Way to put me on blast, man. No. My big, one of the most significant issues for me is abortion, without a doubt. That's one of them. But if I had to stir the pot and get the discussion moving, I guess I would bring out abortion first.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ryan, since you're below and since you guys share the same channel, would you agree, or is Nick just way off?
No, I would agree, but I would say that's sort of a subsection of what I think. I think the protection of life overall would be my most important.
Okay. Alon, what would you say?
My top issue is how do we treat others? How do we treat the unborn? How do we treat the poor? How do we treat the foreign, the alien? So it's something that goes across both parties.
Okay. We're going to come back to that, by the way, because there might be some overlap. There might be a stark difference. Virgil, I'm gonna play the role of a prophet. I already know what you're going to say, but I'll let you tell everyone. I'll hold back.
I want to see if we should break out stones to stone you since you claim to be a prophet, or how this should all work. So,
I think your number one issue is going to be abortion. I think it's going to be abortion.
It is a three-way tie for me: abortion, economics, and immigration.
Okay, so do I get stoned?
All of them relate to the issue of human life, human dignity, human life.
Okay, we're going to have to flesh that out with you and Alon. What about you, Damon?
Yeah, my the way I would nuance it, it's I don't disagree with anybody on the panel. All those things are important to me, but the way that I would flesh it out is to say anything from womb to tomb can be important, and it really depends on how critical the issue is in a particular election cycle. Not every issue is an important issue in every election, right? And so just because it's an important issue for you doesn't mean that that needs to determine how you vote in every election. And especially when we're not just looking at who we're voting for president, but who we're voting for city commissioner, who we're voting for governor, who we're voting for school board, right? So I carry those kinds of things into it as well. Like, what are the most important issues to consider on this go around? And so that's going to range from again, anything womb to tomb, and that means that could cover housing, that could cover economics, that could cover education, And so I know that sounds general, but in reality, any issue that we could talk about is going to be a womb to tomb issue.
Okay.
I just take issue with folks who just their big deal is just the womb, but you don't care about any of the issues in between womb to tomb in terms of how persons actually fare in life. Then that's again more of a pro-birth kind of a position as opposed to a pro-life position, right?
Yeah.
So as Christians, undoubtedly, unapologetically, we all ought to be pro-life in the truest sense of womb to tomb.
Okay. Sir
No,
Walter?
I want to jump in
Okay,
here
go ahead,
and
Bernie.
say I don't disagree with anything Brother Damon said. And in fact, I think if all of us were honest, those of us who on the panel said that life was a primary issue, you would have to say that a vote for Trump would be disappointing, given his current decisions to kind of walk back some of the pro-life positions that he once held. So as it relates to what Brother Damon said, you'd have to say that there's some nuance to it, and I've had to do the same kind of walk through the same kind of a process if I'm going to pull the lever for Trump, and the reason being is because I've got to recognize that from a presidential standpoint, there's only so much given the overturn of Roe v. Wade, given the advance of the Dobbs decision, that a president, regardless of party, can do, regardless of their rhetoric on the issue, right or left. There's only so much they can do, given that the battle really now resides at a more local level within the states. Currently, you've got 10 states with 11 different ballot initiatives as it relates to the issue of abortion, as they're trying to enshrine abortion in the state constitutions. Give me a sec. Excuse me. And as a result of that, we've got to think about that at a local level.
Okay. What about you, Brother Walter?
I'm the one with the cold, and y'all the one coughing. I think that the subject of abortion is probably a waste of precious mental resources. I think abortion is a rabbit trick because both sides are killing babies. And it's a rabbit trick. It's a magic trick. Pay attention to this while I do all these other things. Damon Richardson alludes to that. Pay attention to this one thing while I do all these other things. I look at abortion as how I invest in the stock market. It's called an index fund. I put money into an index fund, and I spread my wealth out to 500 companies at the S&P. Some of those companies may not benefit me or my Christian values, but I can't pull and pick here and pick there. I put my money in the fund, and the fund does what it do. So my voting for a particular person or a party does the same thing as an ETF or an index fund. There's going to be some bad stuff in there, but I have to look at the greater good. And that is, to answer your question, yeah, abortion may be on the list, but it ain't at the top. For me, it may be the economy. You know why? Because when you don't have money, then you begin to do things you shouldn't do. So how the economy is ran in the country may be the mood of how people act, and we may go into anarchism comes because of the economy. Germany was burning their monies just for firewood because it was worth nothing. You understand? And it caused people to look for a savior. Hitler came on the scene because he said, I can do this. And he launched this public works that Germany could not afford. We get the Autobahn from that. And all these Germans was like, man, Hitler is giving us jobs, what have you. And it was bankrupting the German people, but they didn't realize that it was bankrupting them because, like America, We really don't crunch the numbers. We leave it up to the economists. And then when the economists tell us that here's the numbers, then you say you're a leftist or you're on the right. And he's telling you, no, this is what's going to bankrupt you. So I think to answer your question, to me, the economy may be at the top because what the economy does, good or bad, will affect what we do in life.
I agree that obviously the economy is important because without a strong economy, then we are Yemen, we are Indonesia, we are Afghanistan. But for me, I think the only thing worse than a bad or an illegal immigrant is a dead immigrant, an unborn immigrant. I think the only thing that's worse than a child that has to go through poverty is the child that never got the chance to go through poverty, the one that was killed in the womb. I think the only thing that's worse than anything that we can think of, as bad as it can be, is someone who never got the chance at life. Because I know about people who have been at their very worst, their very low, and all of them have this one thing in common. No matter what's happening, they all end up fighting for their life. They'll scratch and claw and fight tooth and nail just to continue to breathe. And I think that the first thing that we have to do is to take care of those other people. And if they come out poor, if they come out wealthy, if they come out as anarchists, as if they come out as patriots, whatever they come out, let's give them the opportunity to come out. Because I don't think that while I agree that we need to have a stable dollar, and while I think that we ought to have a strong immigration policy and domestic policy and so forth, you need people. And you need people who have a chance at life. And I think for me, it's the height of hypocrisy if we say, I got mine, that is my ability to breathe and think and so forth, but that baby, whatever his mother, no, because we can literally legislate that out. We can say, and this is why I think even though Trump is not pro-life like they may say it, what Trump can't do, nor can anyone else do, is dictate how a particular state or the people in that state are going to vote for if they have these different referendums. But what does actually trump that? I'm not to no pun intended. But what Trump does do, what does trump all of that, is the person that can select people to be on that Supreme Court that can make that decision. Because and I keep saying this, ladies and gentlemen, if the Supreme Court ever takes up, they never have, takes up this issue of are unborn babies, are they part of the people? If they ever decide that they are part of the people, abortion is outlawed day one. No state would be, because the Constitution would mandate that. We haven't gotten there yet. And so I think it's vitally important that whoever the president is, and so if it's Trump, he is going to pick a conservative justice if he gets the opportunity. If it's Kamala Harris, she is not going to pick a conservative justice. And so we are that much further away from having abortion outlawed. Every country doesn't allow abortion. Some do, some don't. And I think that we, especially as believers, should make that issue number one. And then we can, rank and prioritize things going down. But I think for me, that's the most important thing.
That's true. The problem with that is the resources that I mentioned. You see, abortion is in my index plan.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is respectfully, brother, respectfully. The way I kind of look at it is, let's say we're living during a time where slavery is still legal and slavery is still going on, and people are killing and murdering slaves. And we say, you know what? We have to continue to let them die because we don't have the economy to support them. We have to continue to let them die because we don't have a place for them to live. We have to let them keep dying because everything around it in the country is just not stable enough. And meanwhile, the first and foremost, we should say, give them a right to live. And whatever happens after that, I mean, of course, we want to live out true religion. We want to help the orphan and the widow, like I said initially. However, we can't stop at death because we can't help them. So I just feel that as a Christian, we should be advocating for life and then help the needy. But we can't help the needy if they're dead.
I think that's a misrepresentation of the Sir Walter Jones show. So anybody here, my members are here, and anybody following the Sir Walter Jones show, I have done countless shows against the killing of children who have no voice, have no ability. For 10 years on the Sir Walter Jones show, that's I have been the proponent against this killing. But I equally have been a proponent on self-responsibility. You see, what the Christian do is We continue to suck on the tits of the government, saying it's y'all do this. Meanwhile, we sit in our homes or in our churches and sing kumbaya and hymns, and we actually don't do anything in our neighborhoods until 4 years when we're trying to show you that we are against something. And COVID came, brother. You said it, the one who went against me. COVID, you brought up COVID. COVID showed all of us how we were not prepared. So the abortion issue can be a distraction if you are only looking at that and ignoring all the ramifications that may come because of these other policies that they have. You're not going to fix the abortion problem. Trust me. Jesus said that the poor will be with you always. But does that mean that we need to ignore the poor? No. Trust me. And there are many times when I was at the Planned Parenthood, I would drive by there and want to get out and speak to some of those young ladies who were going in there. So I fight for it. I do not get distracted with it because my daughter wanted to kill her baby when she got pregnant. And I told her, sweetheart, you can't do this. You can't do this because I'm going to miss out on having a grandson or a granddaughter. Number one. Number two, you're going to possibly stump out the life of someone who could be your savior, who could be the next president of the United States or governor, what have you. Don't do this. And God is not pleased with all these things. And then after she heard me, she said, I'm not going to do it. You understand? So if you don't know what I stand for, it's easy to say to take what I said and say, brother, you're a Christian. You shouldn't be. I think abortion should end.
But what if we just had a rule that you didn't have to decide on that? If there was just a rule, you know what? Because I don't know how old you guys are, but if you're born after 73, my mother couldn't have aborted. Well, I guess she could have went in the back alley. She couldn't have aborted me. I think, Damon, you were born after 73, weren't you?
No. Before.
Oh, okay. So, and we definitely know that nobody could have aborted. Well, I guess Walter was old enough to be around when they were sacrificed to Moloch, but everyone else was born afterwards. And so if there is a rule that precludes that, well, we ain't got to worry about stopping it at Planned Parenthood and stopping that. We don't have to worry about that. I remember when Planned Parenthood was picking up because, hey, now you can start aborting kids. Well, there was a time where you didn't have that. So why not just, because like Nick said, we can do two things at once. We can first stop this and then also worry about the economy or immigration. By the way, guys, we are going to the economy and immigration eventually. I promise you we're going to get these other topics, but I do want to flesh this out because I just think this is a spicy debate right here.
Yeah.
If I could jump in and go ahead.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
One big thing for me is, and this is with so many other areas, whether it's apologetic, whether it's theological, doctrinal, biblical, or what have you, I'm a stickler for consistency. And one of the things that I see is a lot of inconsistency around issues that people claim to be, very convicted about. And so, for instance, I've said it many times unapologetically. I am against abortion. There are some conditions that I find it acceptable. Some very limited conditions, nonetheless. But for the most part, I'm against it. But again, if I'm really so convicted about that, how could I be against policies that contribute to the flourishing of a child? That's not consistent. And yet what I find are people who tend to be most convicted around abortion issues have no problems taking food out of the mouths of hungry children, supporting policies that cause children to struggle in areas such as, or families to struggle in areas such as housing, things that actually impact the flourishing of other human beings. Again, if we're going to be passionate about these issues, at the very least, we ought to be consistent. And what I find is that we get passionate around one or two issues, but then when it comes to something else that is also of biblical value, again, such as the way that we regard immigrants, the way that we regard the poor. There's a number of different things. I find that we start getting really, really inconsistent there. And so, again, that's one of my issues is that, when people are voting, they're essentially voting around, kind of one issue kinds of things. And that's just not how it works in the real world. Everything
Right.
that's important in the real world is not simply about abortion. And abortion is very, very important. I feel very strongly about the lives of the unborn. But if you are passionate about um, rights of the unborn, justice for the unborn, then why not justice? Why not be passionate about racial justice?
Yes.
Why not be passionate about economic justice?
Yes.
Why not be passionate about educational justice? Why not be passionate about prison reform and issues like that? Things that actually do impact other
Absolutely.
areas of life. We're not one-dimensional people,
Yeah.
and this is where we start getting very, very inconsistent. And I'm sorry, but no one candidate is going to champion everything I care for anyway.
Right.
So when I am voting for a candidate that supports issues that I care for, I am simultaneously not only voting in my best interest, but also voting against my best interest, because that same candidate is also going to champion issues that I am also against. Right.
Yes.
So in reality, I just have to individually weigh that out as to which one is going to champion the most issues that I care about. But the reality is that they're all going to support issues that, frankly, um, frankly, as a Christian and even as a citizen, we're going to be against. It's unavoidable, and so we can't
Yes.
really we can't really make one single candidate the right candidate to vote for, because at the end of the day, what if leadership is a big issue for a lot of people, right? And it just comes down to, well, who acts like a leader? Who doesn't divide people? Who doesn't inflame rhetoric and this, that, and that? If we're just looking from a leadership standpoint, well, one of these is clearly not a good leader. It just clearly, for no company, for no
Okay, well,
group.
hold on, Damon, because we're gonna go there. We're gonna get to
And
that
I'm
in
not telling
terms of.
somebody who to vote for. I'm just saying,
Hey,
if that
Corey, I
were
gotta
the
jump in
issue
though.
for
Okay.
somebody, that's what I'm saying. If that were somebody's deal breaking issue and they
Mm-hmm.
were looking at leadership, then it's slam dunk for them, right? But again, leadership is not the single issue that's important. There are other issues important as well, and that's what I'm trying to say. We care about all these things, but we
Okay.
Right.
can't care about all of these things in the same way
Right.
and at the same level of importance. That's the
No,
point.
I completely agree with Brother Damon. I agree with the last statement that he made, as it pertains to we can't hold everything at the same level. Earlier when he was talking, he mentioned about kind of the
Mhm.
inconsistency of holding out the life issue as more important than the other. That there needs to be kind of equity across the board. But toward the end of his statement, he said there needs to be kind of nuance. And so I agree with the latter part. Yes, there needs to be nuance. But to think that all weights, I'll say it this way: there is a priority as it relates to the issue of life because it is so urgent. Life or death is at hand. That does not mean that we don't consider other issues, but to be held to the same level of passion or the same level of of determination on life as we do every other issue, I think is not it's not feasible. It's not plausible. And the latter point that he made was evidence of that. There are aspects that we're going to have to take a higher priority on, and others that we won't. There are other issues as it relates to. He mentioned earlier, kind of womb to tomb, with as it relates to the issue of life, and there is just a nuance of priority. Whose responsibility is it from womb to tomb to care for the needy? And I would argue that federal government has a role to play from a standpoint of protecting life and negating the evil of death and abortion. But at the same time, I don't believe the federal government has a responsibility to ensure that you have everything you need from the time you're born until the time you're dead. And I don't think that Brother Damon would say, I think he would agree with me as it pertains to that. I think as it pertains to particular issues, he mentioned, wanting to take food out of the mouths of babies. I'm unaware of any legislative measure currently that demands that. But if there were one that did, I would not be for it as it relates to something that.
I'll give you one, Virgil. The state of Mississippi voted to cut the free lunch program that impacts literally millions of kids that are economically underprivileged. That is an example of essentially voting for policies that take food out of kids' mouths. The same kids that you were so passionately caring about before they were born. When they are born, you support policies that actually undermine their flourishing. That is an example of what I'm saying. And that's not an either or. It's a both and.
No, I hear you. I'm not familiar with that particular law, and I'm also unfamiliar with all of the issues related to the funding that's taken place in Mississippi that required that to take place. It could have been other facets, because there are a multitude of issues that cause funding not to be available for children in those spaces. I would argue that ultimately parents have a role and a responsibility, but they're in to feed their children. Thereby, the church does as well, and issues like that can take place. And so, parents who have the children have a primary responsibility to ensure that they're doing what's required to feed and clothe their children. And I'm certain that there are other things at a local level that need to be examined. Unfamiliar with the legislation. But I would not be for kids not eating. I don't think anyone on the panel would.
Let me interrupt real quick. Let me bring in Alon, because I know he's chomping at the bit to get in. Let me go ahead and bring in Alon on this.
No, I would like to bring it back to a more, I would say, biblical focus. That's my area, my primary area of interest. And I believe that the problem is that most of the people, I'm talking about Christians that say that they vote because of their faith, most of the people saying that they vote because of righteousness concerns like that are actually deceiving themselves. And the reason why I can say that boldly is that true righteousness is not selective. You don't just pick one or two issues, pet issues, and especially issues that do not concern you, and decide that that's what the righteousness of God is all about. You take the whole counsel of God, and from that, you decide this is what God cares about, and then that will be what I care about. But the problem that we see is that people are more aligned with their chosen political party. You're against abortion, you're against LGBT issues, or you are for the poor, or the immigrant. They're more aligned to that with that than they align with the Bible that goes across party lines and against party lines. And so we might claim that we do it because of the Bible, of righteousness, but often we're just doing political ideology. And I believe that's the key issue that we're facing as Christians. And remember, I started with saying that my key concern is to make sure that I represent God. The other facet of that is to make sure that I do not misrepresent God.
So let me ask
There's a question in the.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Walter.
I wanted to answer a response to what I said earlier in the comment section. It was a great response, even though it was against me. The response was, you only was against abortion because your daughter was pregnant. I think it is ridiculous to say that, because I actually would have insisted that she aborted the child because of who I was. The reason why she wanted to abort the child was because of who I was, a very influential YouTuber and an elder of the church. So I didn't care what nobody said about my daughter being pregnant without having a husband. I could care less what y'all said. I didn't want her to kill her baby because she felt that it was going to embarrass me as a public man, because my daughter, and you best believe when I told the people that my daughter was pregnant, I got emails and text messages about how sloppy I was as a father. It was amazing. And
Yeah.
these were coming from, so-called Christians that I have to follow my daughter everywhere she went 24 hours a day to make sure she's not having sex with a man. You know what I'm saying? So I told her the biblical thing for you to do is to have that baby. And that has always been my stance. So I
Okay.
think it is a gross misrepresentation of a man when he's telling you abortion is not at the top of my list. All these other things we need to consider, like Damon was saying. But because we said it that way, you think we're non-Christian.
Everybody,
Oh,
Real quick, Corey.
everybody here. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Who's that?
Yeah, if I could say this real quick.
Go
So
ahead.
I think we're mostly agreeing. I think there's still some people, I know there are in the chat, that are like, it's got to be the top priority. And I still think that's wrong-headed thinking. I'm not saying it ought not be priority, right? Let me give you an example. So this is how, listen to this. So I want everybody to hear this. So to show you that that's just not, you can't live that out. You can't live that. Every that can't be lived out for every Christian. Here, okay. So 1875 is the first civil rights act that was passed, essentially suppressing violent acts against African Americans in the country, right? And so this was, again, following the Civil War. So they passed this legislation, and for a while, you had African Americans who were even voting, and obviously they were voting for issues that were very important to them. Now, let's just be realistic about the fact that abortion has always occurred, even then. So it's always been an issue of some kind, right? So somewhere around the say maybe 15 years later, 1880s, early 1880s, states started passing Jim Crow laws, essentially making legal racial segregation, which included taking away the right to vote for African Americans. It wasn't until 1964 when the second Civil Rights Act was passed to outlaw Jim Crow laws and to restore the right for African Americans to vote, that we start seeing some change as it related to the quality of life for African Americans. So let me just test everybody's sincerity on this issue. Abortion was going on even then. But if you are an African American and you are a Christian in 1955 or 1960, right? What do you, let's say abortion was let's say that was a hot button issue in the country. Is that going to be a top priority issue for you? Or are all of the quality of life issues going to be important? Things that Jim Crow laws actually impacted for African Americans. That is equal opportunities at education, equal opportunities at housing. You're going to tell me that abortion needs to always be top priority for people who have been at the very helm of essentially legal disparities and racially segregated laws?
Yeah.
And so these things haven't necessarily disappeared either. And this is why it's not that it's not important, but you don't have the right to tell every believer that it needs to be at the top of their stack rank. It can still be somewhere in there, important for them, but they can't decide how they are going to vote every election on the basis of that. That becomes, not only is that wrong, that's just a smoke screen. It's a dangling carrot. It's what Sir Walter Scott mentioned. It's not really the issue that many people are attempting to say that it is. And if we're really being honest, both candidates support abortion. So how you gonna vote? Both candidates support abortion at some level, right?
That's
So
true.
Approve it.
I would like to just cut in real quick. I think when we use the term abortion, it kind of it's so familiar in the culture that we tend to just throw it around like it loses its meaning. But if I were to tell you those same slaves that you're referencing were getting dismembered and their faces were getting ripped off and their heads and arms were getting ripped off and they were screaming in agony right before they died, and we had pictures and we had evidence that this was happening to them, I would think in that culture, even if they didn't have the money to to feed themselves, even if they didn't have a place to live, I think by default that would be our number one priority because of the horrid evil behind the action. And I'm not saying that feeding them is not a priority. I'm not saying that giving them a place to stay or live is not a priority. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying people made in the image of God, people who we love, are getting dismembered and murdered and slaughtered, and they're getting ripped from the womb, and they're getting murdered in front of our very eyes. And to say, you know what, we can't give them a place to live. We can't give them food on the table. So we need to prioritize the other things so we can get our place in order first before we protect them. Meanwhile, there's people getting their body parts ripped off their bodies. Would it be greater priority if they were born? And I think if you're being consistent respectfully and with tons of love, I think if you're being consistent, it would automatically be your number one priority if those slaves were being dismembered.
Let me ask you guys this question. Let me ask this question.
no, that's not.
Because obviously we won't all agree on what should be the number one priority that we have. So let's, again, not to make a pun, but what would trump this would be, what do we think God's priority is? And what I mean by that is, aren't there passages that we can go to and say, you know what, economy wonderful, we want a great economy and so forth or whatever, but there are issues that aren't addressed specifically in the Bible versus other issues that are. We can say how we treat our neighbor, and well, that ought to apply to the immigrant, legal or illegal. Well, we can debate that. What we can't debate are the issues pertaining to life and sexuality and how we treat the children, right? And so wouldn't we have to then put those at the top, the things that are specifically spelled out scripturally? Those have to take precedent as far as we're concerned, because they take precedent with God. Is that the right way, or am I wrong?
That would be like asking. Let's say in Jesus's day, a person that was economically oppressed because they were in a attacked prison. If other issues, for instance, the issue of they called it exposing, right? In Rome, a child could be thrown on a garbage pile or even drowned, or what have you, and whether or not you could vote to impact those issues or not didn't impact the fact that the church still cared for these children. They adopted them, they took care of them, they raised them, they loved them, so forth and so on. So it never impacted the church's response to those issues. But if you're going to ask a person who has been wrongly imprisoned because they owed a small debt and they were unable to pay that debt as long as they were in prison, so they stayed in prison longer, as a cruel injustice, what's going to be most important to them? This is what I'm saying. It's insane for us to be trying to prioritize what is most important universally across the board, just on the back of saying that you are a Christian. There are a lot of things that are important to Christians contextually based on their situation in life and things that they are experiencing on the ground, which does not mean that abortion is not a very important issue. But again, to say that it's got to be abortion, and then we've got to start looking at the sexuality issues. Those issues are all important, even to me. But how I am going to vote is going to be for the issues that are most pressing, most critical in whatever the situation is, whatever is most dire. Those are going to be the things. So, for instance, I'm middle class. If they're talking about, let's say, in this local election, raising taxes so that property tax is $8,000 a year, I'm gonna lose my house, right? That abortion's not going to be the issue that one of the candidates that I vote for that may champion essentially a reasonable property tax, they might be a candidate who believes in abortion. I don't agree with that. But that's not why I'm voting for them. I'm voting for them because they are going to champion an issue that is most critical for me. That is the balance and the tension that we need to have. And attempting to control and universalize how Christians vote on this stack rank of what you think is most important for everybody is just wrong-headed. And
But
I
what
don't
I'm
know why.
saying, but what I'm
I
saying
don't
is
think
not
anybody
not
is.
what's important to us. What I'm saying, is there a time? Is there a way to say, okay, I get that we can't be able to rank what's important for me. That's also important for you. But aren't there some things that say, okay, you know what? These things are not up for debate. These things, shedding innocent blood, giving approval for a man being with a man, and so forth, whatever, and certainly what we do with the children. These are things that are not up for debate. And so, can't we just say, okay? Because here's, and I'm not a Trumpite or whatever. I think he's horrible as a person with his character, but the party at least will house the concern for those issues that I can at least go to scripture and point to. I can't go to scripture and point to something dealing with immigration. I can't go to scripture and point to something dealing with our foreign policy. I can't go to, or if someone says, at least I can say, I agree, disagree. No one can disagree on the issues that pertain to life in the scripture. So shouldn't that be the most important thing as it relates to us? Should we at least point to that first?
Well,
Be
I
interested in how Christians are actually, for instance, Galatians 6 and 10, as much as you have opportunity, Paul says that we ought to do good to everyone, especially those who are of God's household. Now, that goes back to the question of should or must, right? That's an imperative, though. That is an imperative. And I think what Christians are doing, see, this is the fallacy of this whole Christian nation kind of a thing. What it sounds like is Christians have more faith in policy than in actual Christian praxis, regardless
yeah,
of what the legislation is.
right.
What are you doing as a Christian that actually does impact justice in those areas? How many people in your church are taking up, for instance, things like adoption or actually supporting those who are struggling in
Uh,
areas economically, and they're considering abortion as an option, really out of economic desperation? What kind of program or what kind of interest do you actually have in mitigating those kind of things? Don't tell me about some legislation when we are not we have been, the Bible says, predestined unto good works. That's not legislation. That is a divine imperative. And I think the church is actually foregoing on the divine imperative because we're leaning too much and trusting too much on how legislations are actually going to prop up the things that we value. If we can get legislation that actually is good, then let's do that. But we ought not to be leaning on those things more than we are leaning on the things that we have been called to. And one of the things that I see, somebody in the chat said this. Imagine this. A professing Christian said, Black oppression is not more important than abortion. Who in the world gives them the right to determine what's more important for an African American who's experiencing oppression that looks like a number of different things? What gives them the right to actually say that's more of an important issue? That's not Christian and that's not biblical. And yet this person actually, this is what I'm trying to say. This is the inconsistency. And so what did the
Hey
church
guys,
do
I
in
just
the
want to
face?
jump in and say, I just
Let me,
want to jump in real
I'll
quick and
land
say,
right here.
I gotta run to Bible study. It's a pleasure talking to you. I do think respectfully though that we're moving the goalposts,
Right.
and we're trying to throw a curveball at other issues instead of just answering to the arguments that were
Yep.
given.
Yep.
Nobody is advocating for Christless conservatism. Nobody in this panel is advocating for that. And no one is advocating that Trump is a savior and saying that conservative way is the only way to God. No. We know Jesus Christ is the only way to God. No one's advocating for Christless conservatism. But I think what you're doing is you're moving the goalposts instead of just answering to the arguments. But I hope to continue talking to you. I open up the dialogue. We even have a channel that does this ourselves. And I know my co-host is going to do a great job. I hope everybody has a good night.
Thank you, Nick. By the way, moderators,
Yeah,
can you
if
all
I
put
can jump
his
in.
I want him
his
to
channel
lead.
link in the chats? The link to, matter of fact, put the link in the chats to one Bible Dingers, also to Damon Richardson channel, as well as to G3, as well as to Sir Walter Jones. If moderators, if you all could do that, please.
What is his name? The brother who just spoke.
Nick.
Nick, thank you, man. Thank you for your first of all your kindness, and thank you for your heart. I heard your heart tonight, and it actually ministered to me because I can see that you love people, which shows that you love God. And I think the people who are watching here have whether they agree or disagree, but they saw the softness, the humility that is, and the meekness in you. And I just want to encourage you, brother, to keep fighting that fight. I decided not to vote for Kamala Harris for a big reason was because of the abortion issue and a couple of the other immoral issues. So I just need you to know that I'm not the guy who's making a soft point on abortion, but I'm not voting for the Democratic Party because abortion is high on my list. I'm just like Damon Richardson. I just like the well balancedness of the fight because what about crime? Because the baby who was born, that daughter could be molested by some man, might be an uncle. And then that daughter had to go through life, the rest of their life, feeling this pain of the rape or molestation. So now we've got to think about how we're going to vote based off of crime as well. You see what I'm saying? So it's all about the well balancedness. So thank you, brother Nick. I know he's gone, but I'm sure that he'll watch it after that.
Alon was going to say something.
Okay, so I believe that we are making a key mistakes. Sometimes we act as if the issues we're facing today were not present in the first century, that Jesus and the apostle did not have to deal with it. And Damon mentioned something very interesting, exposure, which is even worse for me than abortion. Abortion, I want to make it clear, abortion is horrible, and that's why I will never consider voting for a Democrat presidential candidate. But we act as if they were facing a different set of issues, where in fact, sexual sin, for example, whether it is homosexuality, fornication, were greater than what we're facing here, to the point where Vegas look like choir boys. They have pornographic images in public, and you had Nero that married a boy. We're talking about the emperor, not just somebody that was not central, that wasn't important. So they face the same moral dilemma, they face the same moral issues. But when you look at the New Testament, it does not reflect the same issues that we putting on top. And we need to admit that. And we need to make sure that it's not our ranking that counts, but it's God's rankings. And the second thing we forget is that they did not count on the state, and for good reason, to enforce morality. And that's the mistake we're making. Morality cannot be enforced because it still is a matter of the heart. Come on, we know the Old Testament, even the law of Moses, the perfect law given to Moses, was not able to bring righteousness to people's heart in the Old Testament. And we believe that the Constitution and American law can achieve what the law of Moses did not. So we're kidding ourselves. Actually, it is a denial. For me, it's a denial of the power of the gospel that alone can transform the life. So because people can cease being, having abortion, cease uh, being homosexual and so forth, they are still not justified. And we're losing sight of that important fact. So we need to go back to what is important. And Damon mentioned praxis, because what you do is even, that's the goal of doctrine. Because doctrine is not just so that we believe, doctrine is so that we might do. So what the early church did and what we should do, whether it is for abortion, whether it is for all the other issues, there are other avenues that are more important. And that's one reason, for example, we're not there yet, maybe, but I'm not planning to vote for Kamala or Trump. No, that's not happening.
Okay,
Same here.
so I think this, because we have not always had the ability to legally abort our children. I mean, there's always been abortion. We have not always had the ability to legally marry same sex. We have not always had the ability to legally try to change someone's gender. All these other issues have always been around. We've always had immigration issues. We've always had tax issues and foreign domestic policy issues and things like that. We've always had those things. And yes, this isn't a Christian country, but we're Christian. And if we have the opportunity and the ability to actually vote based on us being Christians, I think we ought to. Just as it also pertains to what's even more sickening, changing the identity of babies or boys into girls, girls into boys. I think these are things that, again, for me, these are the things that I can't see God not judging a nation on that. I can see God saying, okay, listen, I can see God prioritizing whether He's going to judge us on taxes and on immigration and on what our Interior Department does. I can see Him, you know what, that's not the issue. But these things that are specifically spelled out, whether or not we think that there are other issues, because obviously all these things matter. If you've got a nation that has a devalued currency, well, then there's going to be a war. There's going to be a lot of senseless death and so forth. There's going to be starvation. Right. But that's going to happen anyway, no matter what the country is, because it's always been the history. But the fact that we are immoral, maybe if we were more moral, maybe we would see God's hand on us. If the Christian, now I don't care about Trump. I think Trump is devoid of, it seems to me, of any real good character. But I think Kamala is just as well. I think we've got 2 adulterers running for president. I think we've got 2 liars running for president. I think we've got 2 immoral people running. But if the people actually stood up, there's 300,000 churches in America, and we ain't putting a dent in nothing. And so if we just, okay, we against this, and this, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, because the Democratic Party does not respect the Christians. Otherwise, abortion would not be an issue that's off the table, or homosexuality, things like that. At least the Republicans, whether we agree with them or not, whether we think that they are true-hearted or not, at least they are going to say, you know what, I want the vote of the Christians. What do you Christians want? That's what Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump is an immoral tool for people, meaning that he will do what he thinks is going to get him elected, reelected, and so forth. And the problem is the other party, they don't care what Christians think. That's the audacity. And I think that for us as believers, if we just stood up and made our voices heard, you know what? I don't care if you got a D or R, donkey or an elephant. At least don't be an affront to us as believers. And so I think this issue with transgenderism, I think that is you never would have guessed this would be on the. No one on this panel at the date of their birth or when they entered high school or college would have ever thought we would ever see this. No one. I mean, okay, killing babies, but now you're doing something else with the babies if they happen to make it out. And so to me, I think that just has to at some point in time, you know what, I got a passage I can go to point to that. I don't have a passage to go to other things. I think that has to move us to some degree. I think God is, I think God is going to say, well, what did you do with the opportunity that you, young man or young woman, what opportunity did you do? What did you do with the opportunity that you did have to affect something? Yeah, did you adopt someone? Did you hand out food or clothing or something like that to the poor? Did you go visit the sick or those in prison? Yeah. But then also, what about these things that I specifically spoke on?
Personal responsibility is absolutely vital to us. And that's why I mentioned earlier About how I vote is just one little thing. But what I do at home and in my community and in my church and building generational wealth is a whole bigger picture. This is not a Christian nation. I don't care how many times y'all say it.
Hmm.
Ain't nothing Christian about this nation. We just happen to have people who call themselves Christian. All right. Because if this was a Christian nation, then trust me, we wouldn't be talking about this stuff. Because we would be doing things based off of our Christianity. We would be doing those things. As a matter of fact, some nations seem like they're more Christian than we are. Okay, but our freedom has cost us so much. The land of the free, home of the brave, it really has cost us. So I think individual responsibility. Some of us don't even go up to the school to visit the teachers and talk to the teachers about our children's grades. Paper on the street, right there in your yard, you won't pick it up. You don't go to the town hall meeting. We don't do a whole lot of stuff. Every 4 years, we are divided and we fight over the same thing. And the president only have so much power and persuasion, but really, he's a puppet. He's a puppet, and
Yes.
that puppet has just some influence, but it's really about what we do, especially every 2 years in the midterms. Because when Obama got in office, they blocked everything. Did they not? Wait a minute. Y'all voted for this man because he was black. And y'all said he was a great black hope, but he couldn't do anything. Well, not saying that he wanted to or that he was going to even be able to do things for black people, but you voted for him because he was black and he got in there and he served for 8 years. And most people can't go back and see how they benefited as black people from a black president. Why? Because those people voted every 4 years for him, but they didn't vote midterm, which blocked the things that he was trying to do. So what it did was it put the responsibility back on your lap. So your responsibility is still to feed the hungry, to shelter them, to intercede and go out there and spread the gospel, which is the Great Commission.
Mhm.
But Christians today don't do that because we are caught up in the political sphere.
So let me ask you guys this
Can I
question.
jump in?
Correct.
Go ahead, Alon.
But
Go ahead.
shouldn't we look at results to see if whatever we're doing is worth it?
Oh, go on, Alon. You
Because
just that's the
but
segue.
listen,
Just perfect
listen.
segue. Go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that we were so excited that Roe versus Wade was rolled back,
Mhm.
and some people were presenting as being an achievement that would change the country in ways we couldn't imagine. So, allow me to share this slide quickly.
Okay. Hold on. I gotta. Doggone you. I gotta. Okay, there it is.
Yes.
Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun.
So,
Okay, here we go.
we know that 2023 was the first year you had in some state the full ban of Roe versus Wade. We had more than 1 million abortion, which was an increase of more than 11% from 2020. And then you had more than 160,000 that traveled to other states, meaning that Roe versus Wade, the repeal failed to make a dent in the abortion perform. Even worse, that went up. And so the reason why it's we need to understand that we do not have a pro-choice and a pro-life candidate. We actually have two pro-choice candidates. And quickly, Trump clearly showed in various interviews that he will favor a ban after 15 or 16 weeks. He's still in favor of abortion in case of rape and incest, as if the product of rape and incest are not in the image of God. But sometimes he goes up and down, say he wants to eradicate abortion entirely. But in September, he came out and said that the ban in Florida was too strict because they wanted to ban abortion, anti-viability, 22nd, 23rd week, and so forth. He dialed back when he had a backlash from pro-life people. But he made something clear that he will veto a national ban against abortion. So, yes, he claims to be against late-term abortion, but I will see there is only 1%, less than 1%. But he does favor rolling back some of the existing ban, because it says tough, and that those are going to be redone. So what I'm trying to say, and this chart here is key, is that if Trump is for abortion from after week 15, is for 97% of all abortion. So the question is not, is Trump pro-life? No, is because 97% abortion in favor of abortion is not that different in my side to somebody that's 100%. So we need to understand that the people we're counting on are not there to deliver anything for us. They just want the votes, and we fought for it.
We fell for it.
Wait a second. I just messed up something. Hold on, guys. I just, I knew I was
Now
going to
we
do
got
that. I knew I was
we
going
got
to do that. Hold on one second. Let me fix this. I did something wrong. Let me fix this real quick. Let me assign everybody back to this. I know it's
now
going to happen. Let me assign me and Alon. There we go. And
it's that last comment blew you away, huh, man?
well, you know me, and this doggone it. Now I got to take this off. I don't know what did I just. Well, there's an empty box there. I don't know what I just
All
did.
right. All
But
right.
that
Anybody
being the case, when the ruling first came out, I said that nothing's changed because that's not what governs abortion. That's what
Right.
opened the door was Roe v. Wade. But again, we still have the ability to have late-term abortion because of Doe v. Bolton, and then again, it's going to be up to the states. And so, and then let's be honest, the number of abortions have increased because all states don't report, and then too, it's not also counting medical abortions. By appeal, and so there's no way to know. But I say
You can.
we can make a dent in it. But let me just ask you guys this question, because you all know where I stand. You know where Virgil stands, where Damon stands, where Nick and where Ryan stands, where Alon stands, and where Walter stands. But what about some of these other issues, such as issues pertaining to which person, since Walter is a lightweight broker on Wall Street, he wants to be what is who has the better policies regarding, since we're talking about the economy, regarding the economy? Who is going to make it in? I'm going to fix this too. I'm going to fix this. I don't know what I just did. Let me remove you guys. You know what? Let me just do this. Let me take all you guys. No, I can't do that. Doggone. I'm trying to figure out a way to. I don't even see Alon on here. Alon, you still there? You still there? Okay.
Yes, I am.
I just did something. I don't know what I did. Oh well. I don't know what I just did. But anyway, what do you guys think are who has the better economic policies?
I don't think that can be accurately determined by party.
There you
and,
go.
and I think it's false. Say, take for instance, I'll give you some an actual example of that. Bobby Jindal, who was the governor of Louisiana, was a Republican. Am I right? He was a Republican. He was a staunch Republican, but he also economically bankrupted Louisiana. He was not good for the state, right? And is it because he was a Republican, or is it because he just really had really bad fiscal ideas? And so, you know what I just really can't stand is that I've said this over and over and over. See, I'm not a plantation party dude. I don't care nothing about the Republican Party and nothing about the Democratic Party. For people who think one party's platform is more godlier than the other, that's political idolatry. Whether you agree with that or not, it just is. It really does come down to which particular candidate is going to champion the issues that you are most concerned with, that are most critical for you at that time. And so when it comes down to the economy, there could be let's say in a presidential election, a candidate that has better economic ideas than the other one. And yet that's just one issue. But I don't think that's because they're Republican. I think that's because
on these two candidates, though, on these two candidates, irrespective of the party, there's obviously some things in the back that are some other mechanical things.
Let me say that. And again, I'm not saying anything about who I'm voting for, And I don't even care who you decide to vote for. But I think a lot of what we have heard in terms of advertisements and CNN, Fox, so forth and so on, I think a lot of that is a misrepresentation of both economic. For instance, okay, when Trump was asked, "Well, what's your economic plan?" "I don't have a plan. I have a concept of a plan." Oh, so he literally said he doesn't have a plan, right?
Wasn't
So
it about that was about Obamacare though,
That was
wasn't
Obamacare. That was for healthcare.
okay, okay, it was on healthcare, but
Right.
the reality is I don't know whether his plan is necessarily better or whether her plan is necessary. We're not even actually hearing any real details
Yeah.
about either of their plans. What we're being fed is sound bites, in effect, of from advertisements, right? So um, we're being told, say for instance, from more of a Democratic endorsement, that Trump is just going to make tax cuts for all billionaires, right? And let's just say I believe that, right? What am I really supporting that information against? The commercial, right?
it?
And yet there are people who will say something along the same lines against Kamala. But what are you really? Where are you really getting your information from in order
Right.
to be able to determine that one of them is going to be better for the economy or not? Here's what I will say, though, in terms of the fact that we did have 4 years of Trump as president. And again, this is not a for or against kind of a situation. But here's what we do know for a fact is that he did work tirelessly to cut a lot of programs that are important to people who are of lower economic who have lower economic access and opportunities, right? And so for those people, they're not going to see a vote for him as essentially important. So for the most part, most people are not part of the wealthy class. So the real question is how does their economic policies support the flourishing of the average American?
Yeah.
And so take all of the commercials out of it.
Right.
And what I'm not hearing people really get down to is any of the facts or the information. Everybody's taking propaganda from commercials and attempting to make those kinds of decisions. And at the end of the day, um, I'm just not, I am just not as informed enough to be able to articulate intelligently a breakdown of either one of their economic plans. So for the average American, what it's going to come down to is who they think is going to champion economic issues that actually reach them. And
Okay.
I'm just being honest. The average American is probably going to be thinking more in terms of um, how to
Well,
support the middle class and how to support people who need uh, economic funding and economic support. That's those are the hot button issues for them.
Yeah.
Virgil.
Yeah. I was just going to say, as it relates to the commercials, I think for the most part, people don't have to pay attention to any of the commercials. They could ignore them. I do for the most part. Uh, Go in another room, turn the television off. But what people can't get past is what they're experiencing. They know that when they go to the grocery store, that they're spending more money on essential goods, and that's not people in low or high economic conditions. That's everybody. Those in lower economic stratospheres are feeling it more impactfully. They know that they're paying more for bread, for household goods. They know that they're paying more for eggs and other essentials as they go to the store, and they experience that under the current administration. They recall the difference because of the fact that Trump was there 4 years ago, and prior to the time of COVID, they knew that there was a great economic boom. They understood that there were more people, particularly blacks and other minorities, who were at work. Recognized that they had their dollars went farther, that gas prices were lower, that their dollars at the grocery store went farther. And so for the average person who's ignoring or who would ignore the ads as they're kind of put out there, they recognize in their own pocketbooks what's happening. And I personally think it's a large part of the reason why in some of the economically oppressed areas, especially here where I live in Georgia, you're seeing more blacks openly admitting that they're leaning toward Trump as a result of what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
So I'll push back
if I
on
may
that.
say, if I may say,
Mhm.
you just gave a commercial, actually, if we have to be honest, because that's exactly the content, in debates of the commercials. But and what you did something very interesting to me. You looked at Trump record and then you bracket the pandemic. Because if you include the pandemic, all the numbers go down. But why don't you also bracket the pandemic with what happened after? What I'm trying to say is that it's not for Kamala or Trump, because they have pretty similar in many things when it comes to economic policy, and you
Well,
also have
hold on.
factors where they have
You said they have
local
similar policies?
spillover.
You said they have similar policies?
Yeah, in many things. For example, you have the tariff that Biden kept. Although
Yeah,
before, when Trump was bringing them,
he's
Biden
right.
was against it.
Yes, he's right.
So
But they don't
they're
have the
playing
same
games.
energy
They're playing
policy.
games.
The policies are not the same. One
The
wants to
tariffs
drill,
are though. The energy,
and
you're
and
correct.
and the Democratic Party are against tariffs, though they left them in place
Yeah,
because they
they
understood
had
they were
to.
economically beneficial.
Yes, there you go. They had to leave the tariffs in place because when tariffs are instituted, it's difficult to get rid of them because jobs are created by tariffs, but it is expensive to even keep those jobs because of the tariffs. And this whole thing with the economy, as far as Trump and Kamala, is a difficult one because no, they don't have the same. I agree with that, but in essence, there are some things in there that are the same. I think that one thing is when the people were polled and they asked who is the one you would vote for the economy, Trump was at the top. Still today, he's at the top. Why? Well, here's the thing: under the Biden administration, we have a better economy than all of the nations in G7 right now.
Mhm.
But here's the problem: America could care less about the other nations in G7 because
And
when
we
they go to
should.
the store,
That's
they
exactly right.
it's expensive, so they could care less about it. Most economists like Kamala's policies on the economy, but when they poll the people don't like it because what they're feeling right now. So the American people, I will agree, we're kind of ignorant in a sense to whereas we can't really see a bigger picture, and we typically hear what a man or woman says about what they're going to do, and we are built on they build on our emotions, feelings, nothing more than feelings.
You
That's
you
what's
don't you
happening.
don't have to worry about feelings when you go and pay more. Like that's not a
Yeah,
feeling. That's a reality. Like when you
a
go to
I
the
feeling.
store
spend
and
more with
pay,
Trump
the more
equally.
dollars come out of your pocket to purchase the goods and services that you previously had. I don't care how you feel about it. The reality is your economics are impacted. Your bank account is lower, and what they
So
recognize is
Okay, are
that's
you
the
saying
case
that
now.
without
It
Trump there would
wasn't
be
the
no
case
inflation?
earlier, and as a
That's
That's
result,
my
a
point.
slippery slope
as a
so let,
result,
argument.
so
many are
let me let me
leaning
let me
in
chime
the
in.
direction of Trump. That's just the
That's my whole
reality.
point. My whole point is he is pulling on the heartstrings, which is the feelings of the people, and Kamala is as well. If
Purse
we don't,
strings, purse
yeah,
strings.
purse strings, yeah, but the heart is connected to the purse because where a man's treasure is, that's where his what is. You understand?
Okay, so
So
I'm sorry. Let me chime in real quick. Um, I don't talk that much about the economy here. One, because I don't want the government looking at me as though I'm trying to advise anyone inform. But in my
you
previous
mean
life, I was a principal of an investment firm. This is what makes the economy moves. The value of the dollar. That
Mm-hmm.
and then how much is in circulation, how many people there are. We you hear this term supply and demand. Depending upon what you're trying to buy, how much demand is it for them, how much supply. For example, housing. You've got 10 to 20 million, depending on whichever estimates of that many people, whether they're legal or illegal, doesn't matter. They've got to sleep somewhere. And so the cost goes up. You do have to take out what happened with COVID because it is by all definitions an anomaly. It's not, well, I shouldn't say it's not going to happen. We don't know. And that throws everything off. So what did Trump do? What were some of the better policies that I liked about Trump when he came in? Well, the first thing he said he was going to do is he was going to penalize American companies for leaving. And what happened? We saw more businesses get rid of their foreign investment and bring it back. He made it harder for foreign companies to come in to invest in America and to take our labor away, thereby pitting, let's say, General Motors or Ford against a foreign company because their labor is cheaper. And that's not a really good example because Toyota builds here in America. But my point is, company A in China or Venezuela, what have you, wants to build a widget and then send it over here. Well, no, we're going to put a tariff on them. And if the tariff doesn't work, we'll increase the tariff. If they want to either bring down their tariffs against us, or if they want to build a factory over here, because if a Chinese or a Venezuelan or any other country wants to build a factory over here, you got to hire American workers. And so that absolutely helps. If you want to have a good tax policy, ladies and gentlemen, you don't work for a poor person. I don't care who you are. You don't work for somebody poor. And so you better decrease the tax burden on the people that are paying people. It's just economics 101. And so the billionaires and the millionaires, they are going to get theirs. It's just being shrewd. And so when I look at her policies, opportunity zones and things like that, and offering breaks for first-time home buyers, things like that, that will literally bankrupt because we don't have that ability. We don't have the ability for the Green New Deal. We need more. We've got more oil in our country than any other country on the planet, and it ain't close. It's just not close. So why are we still importing oil? Well, you've got to look at the policies of the particular administration. And when you are beholden to someone else's energy, for example, if you kill the Keystone energy pipe, and then you go ahead and agree to allow Russia to build their pipeline throughout Europe, you embolden them, you give them more money, just like you did with Iran, versus take away money from our own. These are American jobs that are going away. When you take away offshore drilling, that hinders our productivity. And so because you've got to deliver these goods and services throughout the country by truck, plane, boat, however, that costs oil, that costs gas. And so our issue is, if we're going to look at the economy, I don't think it's even close. I don't think it's even close. As a matter of fact, I'm still waiting for a specific policy for her. Now, am I saying that Trump is the be-all to end-all? No, because ultimately it's going to be Congress that is going to determine which way we go. But at least if we've got some policies that want to cut capital gains rate for corporations and for individuals as well, if we can do that, then you will have companies hiring. We all can't work for ourselves or work for Uber or what have you. Somebody's got to work for some company, and if that company, if their bottom line is being squeezed, then so too will your pay. And so someone said I disagree. It's just economics 101. You can't disagree with the actual facts. And so who is going to do something that's going to create jobs, that's going to, you can't change really the value of the dollar that much anymore, but can we at least stop putting a squeeze on the dollar? Can we do something with, we have this high inflation because we have too many dollars in circulation. And why do we have that? Because we've got too many people who are working for wages that are not sustainable. So everyone wants, if you're making $1,000, you want $2,000 because that's what it costs. It costs $1,000 to go to the grocery store and buy for a whole month, at least for some people, whereas it used to be $200 or $300. And so not only are the heartstrings being pulled and tugged, but when they go and look at their bank accounts, when they go and look at their actual the bottom line, the black ink or the red ink, these dollars and cents ain't adding up. And so we got to have a better fiscal policy. Both of them, and I'll leave it at this, both of them have a horrible policy as it relates to our national debt. Because what's going to end up destroying us if we don't do it, bankrupt our country morally, is our national debt. Because now just to pay the interest on that debt is astronomical. And at some point in time, our dollars, irrespective of what our policy is going to be, is going to be worthless because we owe so much on our own debt. So I just want to throw that out.
Can I jump in here, fellas?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. because I gotta
I've got to
say,
run. I'm gonna let you talk, but I got. I try to pull a Kanye. I have got to run. I love you, man. Fan of each and every one of you. I follow
Love you,
your
Virgil.
stuff and looking forward to connecting.
Me too.
Please have me back, and please
Yeah,
make this like a 3 hour. We just need to go all night.
that's true.
Brother Damon, I've been following you for a decade,
Oh man,
and love your work. I know we don't agree on everything, and that's
sure.
okay. But brother, keep doing what you do. You brothers love you. I love seeing you, Sir Walter, as well. Love you guys. I look forward to the next opportunity to connect with you. Maybe we
Me
could
too.
chop it up. Maybe we could start at this point and then go
Yeah.
for broke for the next 3 hours. That's what we
I'd
need
like
to do.
that. I'd like
In
that.
4 years.
Yeah. Amen.
God bless you.
Take
right,
care,
brother.
brother.
All right.
all right. Anyways, I just wanted to jump in here, fellas, because we got folks in the chat accusing me of being the token white guy who married into the family and is just here at the cookout, doesn't know who to talk to, doesn't know what to talk about. That's not right. That's not right.
That
Corey,
is the
your
bomb,
chat
bro.
is slandering me, bro. Anyways,
I apologize.
I also didn't get a chance to plug that I got Virgil's book on politics right here, and I was just waiting for the right moment to bring it up that he's some sort of political guru that we should all respect or something like that. But anyways, I love Virgil. I've known Virgil for years. But as far as economy goes, Alon, I was going to speak a little bit about how you pulled up the data and how people need to see facts in order to make decisions, and they need to look at the actual results and outcomes. And when it comes to economy, I think for those of us who know very little about economics, what I personally do is I compare state to state how the economic policies are playing out at the state level. And so I'm in New Jersey, very blue state, been a blue state basically my whole life. My church is in Brooklyn, New York, and I gotta say, I'm I'm one of the last men standing as far as middle class people in my neighborhood, because I've been able to work a deal with my landlords and my friends, and we've kept my rent low. But the economic policies here and in places like New York and California, I feel like the results that you're seeing from their policies is that the cost of living is so astronomically high that folks in the lower class and middle class are being pushed out of the area either by some sort of mass exodus to a red state like Florida or North Carolina. Well, North Carolina's purple. Um, they're mass exiting to a state where they can actually afford to pay their rent or actually afford to pay for groceries and things of that nature. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing half of my church in Brooklyn is gone because they moved to Florida, and you just don't see them anymore. And so to me, and I'm not taking shots at anybody here, but to me it seems a little bit like an inconsistency to say that the democratic economic policy cares for the poor, puts the poor first, but then in reality we see only rich people are moving into my neighborhood now, and everybody who was here before is getting pushed out into a different area. So just floating that idea. I want to see what your guys' thoughts are.
But I don't think that comes down to the party. I think that comes down to the candidate. I'm originally from New York, and I lived in New York at a time when, for the most part, the city was run by mostly Republicans. And you've always had that reverse north to south flight, people moving to Florida. You used to see on just about every corner was a real estate office, pictures covering the window of cheap houses in Orlando and Deltona, Miami, so forth and so on. And that it's not so cheap to flee down there now because it's more expensive living in Florida than it can even be in New York. I think those are the bad economic policies of a number of factors. Again, borough governments, city governments, and then you've got, I mean, let's just be honest, the areas that tend to be the most economically depressed tend to be the prime areas for gentrification. And what mostly ends up happening is that, and it's not even just even a black and white kind of issue, is that the average person gets priced out of their neighborhood because you have groups that come in, investor groups that come in and just buy up a whole block worth of properties, and they're able to essentially control what the market is doing. I'm not necessarily sure who I vote for president necessarily impacts that. And that's what I'm saying. I think Corey pointed out some really good things I'll just be considering in terms of his argument. I'm not a major economics guy, but I think another part of the argument that we're not also considering is that there are economic issues that have absolutely nothing to do with who's president. So for instance, when Obama was president, an argument was made by Virgil. He was talking about people can remember when Trump was president, inflation was lower, this, that, and the other. But I could make that same argument and say, well, if you go back 4 years prior or even 8 years prior, inflation was also lower under Obama, and so was gas prices, and so was the housing market. It was significantly more affordable during the Obama era than it was under the Trump era. And so there's this kind of rising increase but again, I'm not necessarily certain that presidents always have something to do. A lot of the economy is the result of market reaction, right? And market tends to react based on things that are going on in society, right? And that can also impact things like inflation, so forth and so on. And I'm not saying that parties don't have economic plans and they don't support certain kinds of economic policies or don't support policies that they should. But the reality is that I think we're getting duped into thinking that presidents have more ability to impact the state of the economy than they actually do. For instance, gas here we were down to 236. Does that have anything to do with anything that President Biden is doing? Absolutely not. And yet that is a lower price point than gas was almost the entire time that President Trump was president. I'm just saying that there are a number of economic issues that make it either easier on our pockets or a greater burden on our pockets that really have nothing to do with who is actually the president. There are other issues that do. And so I'm thinking we've got to be
say this though, Damon. There's not a lot that a president can do for gas prices, but there's one or two things that he can do in terms of gas prices, such as opening up drilling. Now, people say, well, yeah, but under this administration, there are more drilling leases now. The problem is just because you give a lease, it's where the lease is, and so any wildcat or any driller would tell you, hey, listen, I want to drill here. If the government is going to say, hey, drill over here, I don't want to drill over here. Yeah, I've opened up all these leases. We're only going to drill where we think it's beneficial. And so the government has to go back to opening up more leases, the leases that the people that want to drill, where they can drill offshore drilling, things like that or whatever. But and then also how we affect and what we do to other, let's say, OPEC nations and things like that. But to your point, different states are going to have different taxes and things like that on their gas. Like Illinois, and people go from Illinois to Indiana. I don't know if they still do, Walter, or not, but to go to get gas because it's just cheaper because of the tax that you have in Illinois.
100%. All of my gas ups is in Indiana.
Yeah, so now that's a state issue. Also, let's say if you're in California, you've got environmentalists that are also more involved. And so you're right. The local governments also have a big part. But it's one thing if California or New York or Illinois is increasing the cost of gas because of their taxes and other regulation. But if gas by and large was $60 a barrel versus $120 a barrel, that makes a difference. And if there's just more oil coming in, we're not doing a very good job as a country helping to set the price of crude oil because we are still beholden to too many foreign entities that are bringing in oil. But let me ask you guys this question, because you brought up something, Damon, about when you were in New York, the time that you were there, and I want to deal with this issue. Well, two parts, two issues at once. This issue of crime and immigration. New York City was, I guess, right or wrong, would for some people might have been the model, either a good model or bad model for cutting crime and things like that. I think maybe some folks, well, not I think, some folks will say they did it right. Some folks will say no, they did it wrong. It was racist. It was this. It was that. But now we've got this new thing that's tossed in there, which is all of these different immigrants that are coming in. And so, what do we guys think about who's best equipped to dealing with crime and inflation?
Well, I would go with well, here's what I don't want to do. I don't want anybody to be trying to measure where they think I'm going to vote based on that. I'm not necessarily
Mhm.
an expert on either of their policies. I probably would tend to think that when it comes down to crime, a person that actually um, occupied the role of a state's attorney general would know a lot about
Mhm.
dealing with crime more so than a person that's never really had previous to the previous presidency any governing type role, right? So I would be more likely to think that this person would understand all of the different uh, entities involved, the different nuances involved, the different modalities and methodologies that are involved in lowering crime, because again, that was an area that they actually worked in. I probably would trust somebody that has experience in that area than somebody that doesn't. And then what can we really point to in the previous administration that would show that there was some particular policy that actually lowered crime? You know, here's what I think ends up happening. I'll be quick about this. Sometimes people will say, for instance, hey, well, the jobs report was always really good under Obama, or it was good under Trump, and this, that, or the other. And very rarely will you actually hear about uh, what are the causes of that? Like, what did they actually do? We can easily say this was better under this one and this was better under that one, but what did that president actually do to actually impact that? What are the variables, right? And oftentimes we don't discuss that. Like somebody was saying, black home ownership rose under Trump. Well, it was already rising, mind you. It had been at its lowest. Why? Under Republican presidents. But why though? I'll tell you why. That was because of all of the daggone predatory lending. And that didn't happen. And when did that happen? That happened under Bush. And so this is one of the reasons why there was such a significant decrease in black home ownership, where that significantly began to rise under Obama and continued to rise under Trump. I don't know that I would necessarily give Trump the credit for what might have been happening under the Obama era. And the reality is what was happening under the Obama era may not have anything to do with any policies that he actually did. Well, what we did see is a market, the bubble bursting,
Mhm.
and then we also saw, of course, banks being penalized for predatory lending, this, that, and the other. I would imagine that many of those things started to help to turn things around. But again, I think we often give credit for certain things happening under one president without really giving intelligent thought to, well, what's the cause and effect of that? Is it really related to who was in office, or is it some other explanation for why that began
I'll
to
say
rise?
this.
Yeah.
This is going to bother. This is going to. It might be Walter. It might be you, David. It's going to bother one of you too. Because I remember one of you guys said this guy is the worst president that you think. But the cause of the economic downturn and the reason why housing, blacks started gaining housing, or you started seeing housing or things increase after Obama got in, wasn't really about Obama. And I remember this specifically because we used to rail against this. This is when I was actually in on Wall Street. We would say this: the problem is what's happening with houses. everyone is being given a house. Everyone is being brought in to get a mortgage, and they don't qualify. Because yes, we had redlining, but then we had to go the opposite way, where we started forcing banks to lend to people who didn't qualify or who just barely qualified. For example, in the state of Texas, because we had a mortgage company also in the state of Texas, if you default, if your mortgage company defaults on a certain percentage, then the state is going to fine you severely. The problem was the state wasn't fining anybody. As a matter of fact, we go look at other states, they weren't fining anyone. So everyone who didn't deserve to get a house, or I should say, afford to or make enough money, have enough credit worthiness to get a house, they were getting houses. And what happens is you got these houses that are owned by people who can't afford. By the way, paper is traded. When you buy a house and you have XYZ mortgage company, and then you look up the next month, and then another bank owns your paper, because what's happening is they're taking that paper, they're bundling it, and they're selling. So you can go and buy different investment products with those in there. And so what happens is, let's say if interest rates fall or rise or anything like that happens, then this lender might, or this person that's holding the paper might start selling off assets. Well, when you start selling off assets, that triggers a domino effect in the market. What ends up happening then is you've got a lot of folks defaulting and defaulting and defaulting. And you've got these banks, these insurance companies and banks and brokerage firms that also have a high stake in these mortgages. And so they're defaulting. Their capital, their creditworthiness is also at stake. And so they start selling off. So we got this large crash. And the reason why, and here's why I brought up George Bush, because he literally went to Congress and said, guys, we've got to stop forcing banks to lend to any and everybody, because what's going to happen is we're on this house of cards and it's going to collapse. No, you don't want people to buy a house and this and that or whatever. You're against folks having the American dream. You're only for the rich folk. Well, no, he was right. Other people were hollering this. I don't know if it necessarily started with him, but it was something that was easy to see. And so what do we have? 2007, 2008, we have this crash. Well, when you have these crashes, the economy is going to bounce back. And whoever happens to be in office at the bounce back is going to get credit. And so when you go start looking at, well, who ran the House, who ran the Senate, and things like that, you're going to start saying, okay, well, maybe we don't give the president too much credit. Maybe we ought to start looking at Congress.Maybe we ought to start looking at Senate and at the Senate and what bills. And so to answer your question, what kind of caused the underlying problems with the Wall Street and the housing market? It was that highly leveraged, meaning the people that did not deserve to have these mortgages, they got them. Guess what's happening right now, ladies and gentlemen? We've got the same thing brewing now, where people who should not have these mortgages are qualifying. Why? Because that's how banks make their money, lending things out. And if I can lend out to somebody just for the time being, and then turn around, I've got, let's say I'm going to use Walter. Walter has a 300 credit score. We gave him a mortgage. We know Walter's going to default, but he won't default for the next several months. So we'll take up that, and then we'll bundle that, people just like Walter, and sell it. And if it crashes again anyway, because I'm going to short it anyway. I'll make money on the crash anyway. And that's what, ladies and gentlemen, it's starting to happen again.
Yeah. I don't know why he used me as a 300. That's an insult. I want to play this 38-second audio thing here.
I got to figure this out. Okay, you got to set
up. You ain't got to figure out. I got it right here.
Okay.
To prove that Donald Trump built his wealth off of the Democratic policies.
Okay.
On the economy. Listen to this.
I've been now around long. I think of myself as a young guy, but I'm not so young anymore. And I've been around for a long time. And it just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats than the Republicans. Now, it shouldn't be that way. But if you go back, it just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats.
Well, it certainly did well under Clinton. Well, but I wouldn't suggest it was so great under Jimmy Carter.
That's true. That's
if
true.
you remember
That's
the interest rates.
No, I know. It's Jimmy Carter was not in the same thing, but certainly we had some very good economies under Democrats as well as Republicans. But we've had some pretty bad disaster under the Republicans.
Now that was Donald Trump, okay, who built his wealth off of the Democratic policies. But here's the thing: I'm with you guys on that whole issue that the president can't do too much. He can't. There's some things. The history is the job of stabilizing and managing the economy was Congress. It was their job. but hardly any of them were and still are economists. They are not economists. So they don't really know much about, economical issues. So what they did was they decided to set up this organization called the Federal Reserve. They outsourced their jobs. So they had the Federal Reserve had a dual mandate that was about price stabilization is what we are fighting with right now, and then maximum sustainable employment, which we look for every quarter to see what the employment is going to be. But the problem happened during the Obama administration was the supply chain disruptions. Who do we blame for that? Number two, the Fed added more money to the system to avoid a recession. Who do we blame for that? The stimulus checks came through Obama and Biden. I'm sorry, to Trump, that is, and Biden. So who do we blame for that? Then there was an increase on demand on products. Who do we blame on that? Then there was interest rates. They had to raise the interest rates so to stop the slow on demand. All these problems here is the problem of the American people, but the job of the president is to curtail that. So, mostly nothing he can do, but some things he can do, like you said, and that is how much the government taxes. I will say something that is Democrat is I don't have a problem with the Republican policy on stopping the Democrats from taxing the rich. I think you mentioned it, Corey, that if you overtax the rich, who owns the corporations who I work for, I may lose my job.
Yeah.
So as a man who was in Wall Street, I understand the importance of not overtaxing Mr. Apple, because then he is going to start laying off folks and downsizing. And so there needs to be some kind of balance in that. I do agree.
Right.
But when it comes to immigration, I think that was your question on immigration.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with immigration under Trump and the Republicans was there was a bill. The Republicans blocked that bill. I don't know if y'all remember it. It happened this year. A $118 billion border bill package. They blocked it. It was bipartisan. Okay. And instead of them wanting the bill or accepting the bill, they decided to try to impeach the Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandra. Remember him? He's still the secretary. They did this for political reasons because Donald Trump says, block the bill because we need the border to be out of control so that I can have a talking point. And Mitch McConnell was like, you know what? Let's accept this bill. Other prominent Republicans said, let's accept this bill. But because Trump called at the 11th hour, he says, block it because we need the bill to be, we need this border to be fixed under my administration. This is why they blocked Obama from getting a Supreme Court justice, because Mitch McConnell like, no, let's do it when the next man gets in office. So I think it is unfair to give Trump this or the Republicans this credit for immigration when they had the opportunity to help bipartisan wise to stop this and they didn't. Now, Kamala, I agree, dropped the ball. Biden dropped that ball. All right. The Homeland Security, they dropped that ball on immigration. Yes, they did. But Republicans had
So let me
an
ask you this: what was it about that bill that you thought would have curtailed illegal crossings?
It may or may not have curtailed. My problem is the talking points. Republicans have nothing that they can say against it. It's like how you asked the question about voting. We can't complain if we don't vote. You agree?
Yeah.
Okay. The Republicans can't complain if they had an opportunity to do something, whether it was going to do something or not. They had an opportunity and they blocked it. And one reason why they blocked it, the main reason again, is because they felt that if it would have worked, it would have worked under the wrong guy's watch.
Here's why I disagree. One, all the Republicans that voted against it didn't do it because of Trump. There was already arguing against the bill going through because of what was also
because of
included.
Ukraine.
But then you also had Democrats, six senators who said, "I'm not voting for this," and so they did not vote for it because of Trump. But all the bill was essentially doing was bringing in all of these extra workers to process these people through. Nothing in the bill was going to stop any crossings other than put a cap on the daily limit of crossings, and then we go back to the next day and so forth. But I think the issue is though the bigger issue that we can look at. We literally have an opportunity to look and see what were crossings like under him and what were crossings like under her. Prior to that bill comes out 3 years later, 3 years after. And remember, she comes up and says there is no border crisis, there is no issue at the border. She says that, and so she didn't have a leg. She doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to the border. It doesn't look like.
That's my whole point. She did lie, but here's again, I got to stand on this.
Mm-hmm.
You had an opportunity to do something about it. It didn't matter if it's only the Democrats. It was like only 6 of them, or how many outside of the 6 who was for. Look on the Republican side. You've got those who are strong, old men who was prominent in the Republican Party who says, "Let's do the bill." There is no way that Mitch McConnell would agree to anything that the Democrats do. He saw this as an opportunity to help.
To say we did something.
Yeah. That we did something because these men and women in Congress was up for vote. They're getting ready to lose. What's his name down there in South? He may lose his job. Texas, the senator, I think is in Texas.
Who, Cruz?
Is it not Cruz? What's the other one who packed his bags and was getting ready to leave because the hurricane came? And
Ted Cruz?
Ted Cruz, yeah. He's up for the fight. Is that Ted Cruz? Yeah,
Ted Cruz. He's going to win.
Yeah, he's going to
win.
He's up for the fight of his life. Whether he may, but he gonna get it by the skin of his teeth. He's up for these men and women were up for re-election, and they had to do some kind of bipartisan thing to go across the line. So I think the problem here is the talking points. Republicans are just as guilty as Democrats. They say that they are going to do stuff, and they always say the American people don't want this. You really don't speak for the American people. The American people tells you and shows you. Who was that says when a man shows you who he is, believe him? And that's what the American people are doing. We are showing them who we are, but they don't believe us.
I feel like at the same time, this bill is being used as a talking point on the Democrat side as well, because it is being called a border bill, and we're being led to believe that this is primarily to secure the border, but it was actually primarily to send money to Ukraine. It wasn't sending money to Ukraine baked in. It was $20 billion for the border, $60 billion for Ukraine. And so I think, 14 for Israel on top of that. So altogether, $74 billion for foreign aid. And I think a lot of Republicans believe that there's some corruption there with all the money going to Ukraine. And so they blocked it in order to stop the corruption. And I think a Republican would say that the border thing was thrown in there so that come election time, the Democrats can say, we tried to close the border and Republicans were against it.
And Mike Johnson, he wanted to separate the bill, which I would have agreed with, separate it. Make it a immigration bill, and then make an Israel and a Ukrainian bill. I was all for that. They put it together to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I agree with you, and that's why I alluded to earlier that the Democrats is just as responsible for this mess as the Republicans. It became a political matter. It's my main point. This bill, playing with American people's lives and people across the nations, was a political thing. And and that is the whole fight of this election. We're playing with people's lives.
Let me ask you guys this question as we get ready. We're getting close to wrapping up. I want to ask this question. Let's end with another spicy way to put this. Because something was brought up earlier about treating our neighbors a certain way, and how does the Bible relate to that? Because after all, we are Christians. What about, because I think that it's pretty clear as to who would decrease illegal crossings between Trump and Harris. But something that Trump has brought up is this notion, this issue of mass deportation. Is that something we should do, and is it a biblical stance? Should we? Is it ungodly to deport these people? Is it should we go ahead and take them in? They're here, love on them, have them assimilate, or get rid of them?
Yeah, man. That's always a tough one because Chicago being a sanctuary city, we were inundated with um, the immigration problem, and much of it was due to Republican states busing and flying them here
Mm-hmm.
just to push the button of a democratic city, and New York as well. And we actually, I think, did a decent job at housing them. The problem was they housed them at the cost of those who already live here and who are paying taxes. And so people, well, black and brown people were disgruntled because the city was taking vacant lots and vacant buildings, what have you, and they were building it just to house these um, what do we call them? Migrants. Uh, my problem with the fight against with the blacks here in Chicago was that why was that building left vacant for 30 years? What did you do with it? Nothing. As soon as the migrants came, the city says you're not doing anything with it, so let's put these people in it, and then black people start marching in the street. That's how silly we are. So if people are already here, we do have a Christian duty to take care of them, not to the point where we coddle them, or what's the old adage of feeding a man a fish, or teaching them how to fish. It's we can unfortunately coddle people to the point where that's why we have the public aid system.
Can't we send them back with Bibles?
See, you're right. Or throw paper towel at the Puerto Ricans when the tornado comes. All kind of stuff. We are really horrible at. Listen, this one last thing I want to say, especially, and we don't have time, but I'm sure you was going to talk about what is it, foreign matters
Mm-hmm.
with whoever's going to be the president. If you can't govern at home, how are you going to set up democracies around the world? If you can't govern at home, we can't govern at home. And we're calling Donald Trump an anti-war president because of his administration. And that is the biggest lie that the Republicans have told, that he was anti-war. That is a lie. Biden deployed 160,000 troops. Trump deployed 198,000. 16 died under the Biden administration. 65 died under Trump. Biden sent about 500 drones and ended the drone strikes, and nobody celebrated him. But Trump sent out between 300 and 18,000 drone strikes. Okay. Reason why those numbers are so vast is because his administration kept it quiet and they didn't report it. And then all of these wars that Obama started, but Trump benefited off of by continuing it. He launched attacks on Syria, 59 Tomahawk missiles. The number of civilians that was killed in Afghanistan increased 300% on his. Man, there's a whole lot of stuff that he did, but we don't know how to go back into history just a week to see and crunch the numbers and see that, wait a minute, he did more damage than we think he did because we don't do the research. So immigration is concerned. I think there needs to be better control or patrol, however you want to call it, for the borders. We need to do something and stop as much of the bleeding as possible. But with those who are here now, you can't just sit here and let them die. You've got to take care of them.
I'll say this quickly. You know, these are all important issues. I don't want to play any of these issues down. Immigration is an important issue. I don't know if anybody's got the answer to that. The crisis at the border is terrible. Immigrants flooding U.S. cities and overburdening their economy and their resources. These are all problematic issues. I don't know who's got the answer to that. I think in conversations like this, what we really have to really get right, that we can't afford to get wrong, are things like what should be the Christian attitude towards a lot of this. And that's where my biggest concern is, because quite honestly, there's a lot of people who they're not really practicing biblical Christianity. They're practicing some syncretism between Christianity and their political party.
That's exactly it.
And this is what they're caping for, many of them, even in the comment section. And the reality is that is a political idolatry. Here are 5 areas, and not to essentially be reductionist or delimit Christian response and attitude to only these 5, but here are just 5 summary, I think, areas of instruction for believers towards government that inform us, regardless of which candidate or which political platform you are voting for. This is what I really want to point out. I think number 1, the Bible supports the notion of paying taxes. When Peter was asked, "Hey, does your teacher pay the temple tax?" He said, "Absolutely." Matthew chapter 17, verse 24 through 27. Right. Obviously, taxes are needed, are a significant part of supporting the economy. Obviously, well, that's always going to be an important issue for Christians as well. Is it right to pay taxes? Yes, but Christians are also going to vote around issues of taxes, because some taxes are a greater burden in certain areas, whether it's property tax or other kinds of taxes. So taxes are going to be important to American citizens as well as Christians, but that's something that we need to consider from a Christian standpoint when we're thinking about it. I think the other thing is the Bible tells us, 1 Timothy 2:1-2, is to pray for political leaders, not just the ones that you support, but to pray for political leaders. We ought to have a heart posture towards asking for God's sovereign rule, recognizing, first of all, God's sovereignty, Jesus as king, regardless of which party is dominant in Congress or which president is elected. But with that in mind, our attitude ought to be to sincerely pray for political leaders. We're instructed in Romans 12:18 that as much as possible to live peaceably. I see Christians that are not contributing to shalom in this country, but are contributing to hostility in this country, because they have become a part of the problem that is culturally inflamed in America, because they don't know how to have these conversations, and they are not walking in the right Christian mindset and attitude about government and politics. And I am not apolitical. I believe Christians ought to participate in politics, that we ought to have a voice. What I think is happening is the way that we are participating is very, very ungodly. I'll say the 4th thing is the Bible tells us that we should honor political leaders. 1 Peter 2:13-17. It says even honor the emperor. Yeah. Quite evidently, many Christians were suffering under many of these emperors. If you look at the 10 great eras of persecution under at least 12 or 13 different emperors, I'm sure in their heart they disliked many of the ways and the policies of these emperors, but they were also instructed to have a right attitude towards authority. It doesn't mean you've got to agree, doesn't mean that you can't critique, but a lot of the nastiness, listen, you ought to check whether or not you've got whether you're really born again, whether you really have the fruit of the Spirit, when you start getting into calling these candidates names, and then even repeating falsities and ungodly things as Christians, right? When you can get down to thinking that it comes down to, well, if I vote this way, this person's the Antichrist, and these kind of things, that's ungodly, and that's not a Christian attitude towards those that are in authority, those who are leading. And again, you can disagree with them, you can even critique their policies, but Christians are called to have godly attitudes towards those who are in authority. And I would say the fifth area is what Jesus said regarding many of the Pharisees and Sadducees in Matthew 23 and 23, when he said that many of the Pharisees were so meticulous as to tithe on mint and cumin and things like that, but to neglect the weightier and the more important areas of the law, which he said was mercy, justice, and faithfulness, right? And so it's quite interesting. I don't know which candidate necessarily is going to have all around the best policies. Some might have some good policies and not others, and the other might have some good policies and not others. But at the end of the day, here's what we are called to as Christians. We are called to make sure that whatever it is that we're supporting, that it includes policies that are thoughtful towards mercy, justice, and faithfulness, right? And we're not going to get it right regardless of who we vote for. We're just not going to get it right, but we ought to at least have that in mind. And the reality is that people can talk about immigration reform, and that is needed. But if you're talking about immigration reform, but you're walking away laughing at xenophobic kinds of jokes, and you've got xenophobic attitudes about immigrants, then that's ungodly. And I'm not talking about folk in the world, unsaved people. I'm talking about Christians who are having those kinds of things in their heart. So listen, regardless of who you vote for, here's what I'm telling you to do. Check your heart, especially before you get in these comment sections and you want to judge somebody's spirituality based on which person they are voting for. That is ungodly, that is unbiblical, and that is unchristian. So regardless of what reason, I will never discount your valid reasons for voting for which candidate you are voting for. But once you start embarking on Christian nationalism and political idolatry and party Christian kind of syncretism, that's when I'm going to say that's heresy. That is not faithful to the gospel, because now you're equating people's salvation and their biblical orthodoxy around which platform they ought to vote for. Those are the more critical issues that I see in these conversations that often don't get discussed. So whether you want to vote for Trump or Kamala, I honestly don't really care. But don't come for somebody based on who they vote for and then try to judge their walk with God because you think they voted for the wrong party. And if you think that the Republicans is the party of God and the Democrats are the party of Satan, or vice versa, the Democrats are the party of God and the Republicans are the party of Satan, then you've completely missed the entire biblical conversation going on. And you've literally done what the entire Bible rails against, not putting your trust in men, but putting your trust in God. That's what I actually came here to say. I don't know who's got the answer for the economy. I don't know who's got the answer for immigration. I think we can all agree we need sensible gun reform. We need immigration reform. We need economic reforms. I think we can all agree with that. I don't think any one of them is going to have the right answer, but all I am saying is let's have the right Christian biblical attitude towards government and towards leadership and towards politics, and not actually be mirroring the kinds of ungodly attitudes and actions and positions that we see unbelievers doing. I think Christians are single-handedly discrediting Christianity based on those kinds of attitudes. We're literally throwing it, we're literally contributing to a post-Christian kind of, we're expediting that because when people just don't trust Christian response in conversation because we are so politicized in the way that we have these conversations, that we have essentially bought into this idea that conservatism equals Christianity. And that is wrong. And I am by no stretch of the imagination a theological or a political liberal. So don't even try me with that. What I am saying is there's a whole lot of Christian idolatry going on in these conversations, and folk need to repent of that. Vote for who you want to, but check your heart when it comes down to those things. I'm done.
Good.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Go
ahead,
Alon.
Alon.
Yeah. What I would like to say, okay, to kind of first go back to mass immigration. I believe, as a Christian, I believe that we need to be people that follow the law and that respect the law. And because of that, I'm against illegal immigration. But on the flip side, as a Christian, I also believe that whether they are legal or illegal, or even criminals, are made in the image of God.
Yes, sir.
And I have the duty to treat people as people made in the image of God. And it's not just an affront to them when I fail to do so. It's an affront to the person that gave the image, an affront to God himself. So, things like encouraging, demonizing illegal immigrants, accusing them without proof of, eating pets and dogs, things that will appeal to the flesh and make, the worst in human beings, that's wrong. So we need to make sure, yes, we can support the law. We can be for legal immigration and not for illegal immigration, but we are believers. And I believe that it's important to make sure that we act as such. And that leads me to what I believe is the most important thing we need to remember, not every 4 years, but every day, is that we represent Christ. And our mission on earth is not to elect a president, is not even to end abortion and all those, or poverty, or all the sins in both sides. Our primary mission that has an impact in this life, in the next, it's our ability to bring the gospel to the lost. And you know what? You have lost among Republicans, you have lost among Democrats. So we need to make sure that we put ourselves in a position where we don't hinder the gospel. And the number one way we hinder the gospel is by being hypocrites. And on both sides, I see hypocrisy. Because if you can vividly see the sin of one party and give Bible verses, but when that comes to the sin of your party, you don't see it, and you excuse. Unbelievers notice that. Unbelievers see that, and that impact our testimony and our ability to bring the gospel with credibility. And that should be our chief concern on earth, because eternal life or eternal damnation is what is at stake. So please, let's keep in mind what comes first.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I got to say a couple things. First of all, our cats are in crisis because under Democrat law, they're eating the cats. All right. They're eating the pets. That's number one. And then number two, we all saw before our very eyes Corey tossing his cat across the room. And so we are in a cat crisis.
There's a couch right there. There's a couch right there. Yeah.
So that's first and foremost. All right. But also, I did on a more serious note. I opened when we were going around saying what the most important positions are, and I'm going to offer a few pushbacks here. Although I love my brothers that are on this live stream with me. I did say that I believe the most important issue is life, period, the protection of life. And while abortion is a part of that, and stopping abortion is a part of that, I believe that there are other things that are a part of that as well. And I do believe that while I don't worship Republicans. I don't believe that they replace Christianity. I'm a Christian first. I do believe that Republican policies protect life in many different areas better than Democrat policies. And I believe that Democrat policies aim more for protecting quality of life over Republican policies. And so I personally believe that there should be prioritization when we're sifting through these issues. So, for one, obviously, and everybody knows it, is the abortion issue. I believe that Republicans are on the protecting life side for the abortion issue. And I believe that the Democrat talking points are more on the quality of life side thing, such as, we ought to be taking care of them when they're poor, so on and so forth. And I do believe that if you take that to its logical conclusion, you are saying that it is better for that child to be dead than to be poor. Now, I'm not saying that anybody on this panel said that, but that is often said on the Democrat side. So that's number one.
That's right.
Number two, I think as far as the border policies go, I think an open border is also anti-life, because I believe that an open border leads to just an ocean of fentanyl coming into the into the country, and fentanyl overdose deaths are sky high, and the human trafficking is coming across the border. Now, I love these people, and we mentioned earlier that a lot of folks are getting bused to New York. My church is in Brooklyn, New York, like I mentioned earlier. We have a Spanish service now because a lot of people have been bused to our neighborhood. And so we love these people. They've joined our church. My wife is Mexican, and so consequently, my 4 children are Mexican. Now, with all that being said, I do think that we ought to have a closed border because I think that it protects the lives of the migrants, and it protects the lives of those of us here in the States. And then also, Sir Walter, you mentioned the wars and how Trump dealt with Syria and all that stuff. And I believe what you're talking about is when he was dealing with ISIS in particular. And so I'm sure there was casualties and things of that nature. But I think that you may have done us an injustice by stopping at Trump and not then going on to Biden, where we now have the Ukraine and Russia war and the war in Israel. And I believe that the death toll is much higher there for civilian casualties than what we see under Trump. And so I say all that to say that I think a lot of these policies I side on the Republican side for, simply because I believe that it does a better job at protecting life over protecting quality of life. And to me, I find that a priority. And I know we moved on from abortion, and I'll get off my soapbox here, but it reminds me of the Old Testament when God had the Israelites drive out the Canaanites. He had them drive out the Canaanites due to child sacrifice, because they were sacrificing the children to Moloch. And I don't think there's any examples in the Bible where the Lord would prioritize something such as quality of life to that degree. And so I think that if it's a priority to the Lord, then I also should make it a priority to myself.
The only
Sir Walter
problem I
Jones?
have
But
with that,
biblically, abortion is not the same as what people did with the cult of Molech. That always,
Why
I'm
do you
not
say
saying that
that?
you're necessarily doing that.
How so?
I'm saying that because one was a religious practice,
That's true.
and those were people,
But can we speak for
children
the
already
babies?
born, and they
Would,
could be even
I
older.
gotta say though,
would the
I
babies
gotta
say
jump
so?
in there though and say that there's more child death with abortion than there was with sacrifice to Moloch, because they would pick and
I agree.
choose children to
I
sacrifice to
agree.
Moloch. Okay. Just
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, I'm not really comparing them with these wars, which is better, but I say those two are not the same.
They
But
are
if you
not.
kill if you've got a reason to kill, and it's not a godly reason, I don't think it mattered if it was Moloch or Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, but the comparison really, I think it's a sad attempt at focusing on something by bringing in something that may be irrelevant. I agree with the brother from Bible Dingers. 99% of the things he said, you can hear that it came from his heart, and I agree, especially his evaluation of the quality of life spent from the Democratic Party opposed to the Republican Party, who just wants to save life. He is absolutely correct, and I commend him for saying that. There was a poll done here on this show by Dinah, our dear. I stole Dinah from Corey Minor, right? Dinah put a poll up, and it looks to me that 60% of the people who are here are voting for Trump, which I automatically knew that myself and Damon was going to be crucified at the stake of the public opinion. But what she also did was she put up a poll that asked the question: should the U.S. What is it? Mass deporting, incorporate mass deportation. Well, before I saw the percentage, I was a little nervous because there's mostly Trump voters here. But I was encouraged to see that it's almost half and half, which is telling me that there are more people here, even though they're voting for Trump, that they do feel that the mass deportation may be a problem. I think the verse of the day is Matthew 23 and in verse 24. And this is based off of my answer to maybe further for Nick, all right, who brought up the disembodiments of babies in the womb or even after, like late term. You blind guides, he says here. You strain out a gnat, but you swallow a camel. The hypocrisy in us is not surprising to me, but it's a problem for me because I do believe that all of us are susceptible to be very good people and very evil people. All that is in us. It depends on our choice of life, whether we're going to listen to the Holy Spirit or grieve him. All of us can be pulled in by Marxism, socialism, fascism, you name it. We all can get pulled into that. It's really easy for us to do that because we're hungry. But when he brought up the embodiments of and cutting up babies, to him and many others, should be your focus because this is something so terrible that's happening to these babies. Well, that is the shock and awe that pulls on the heartstrings of people, yes. But then there's a baby that is born, and this brings up this young man who talked about the quality of life. Now this baby is born. He wasn't aborted, but he starves to death. Or something else happens to this child. Death is death. They both are unfair to happen to a child who don't have the ability to save itself. So Jesus was talking to hypocrites, was saying, you all are doing all these things just to follow the law. Damon brought it up about the tithing. You all are so exact that you tithe in even the spices, but you're forgetting the weightier matter. So all through the Old Testament, we see it among the major and the minor prophets, the main focus was taking care of the people. And those were, he mentioned, strangers, those sojourners, those people who are, when you glean in the field, leave some behind. And even in the third year of the tithing, he said, give that to who? The stranger, the widow, the orphans. All right. So when we forget all of the values of the Old Testament and where God was trying to teach the Israelites a very important lesson, America, we teach Bible, but we don't really follow it because the immigration issue tested us on how to treat people once they're over here. So the mass deportation, which Trump wants to do, will be if he does it, will be a major problem. But what it also will do is give Christians the opportunity to speak and to reach out and to be even more empowered. So this relationship with politicians don't bother me whatsoever. I like both the Republican and the Democratic. I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna look at individuals. I've already done the research. I know who's running. I know their policies, and I'm just gonna vote for people who are. I don't care what side they are. I'm just gonna vote for them based off of what I know from their track record. Unless they're new to politics, then I gotta search them a little bit more. I like to be well balanced. I don't care what the comment section is saying. I'm a well balanced man, and as a Christian, my hope is that when I see Jesus Christ on judgment, that he don't say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do this, because I adopt children. And there's many of your children, not physically, not literally this, but many of your children out there I've adopted because they can't talk to y'all. They call Uncle Sir. And I send money to those kids who are in college, your kids. I pick them up and take them out on dates, your kids. You understand? I do that because I'm a believer, and we must make sure that the quality of life continues. You didn't abort your child, thank God. Now, my job is now to help you raise that child by any means necessary. So I think the panel was brilliant. It was perfect. It helped us really get this out, even though it was 9 hours. I thank God for it. And even though the pushback was in the comment section is good because he said, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you." It's good that they're spitting and spewing hatred at you all. This is a good thing because if everybody liked you, that's a problem.
Now, by the way, quick fact. I always have to bring up my quick facts. Sir Walter Jones was actually there when John the Baptist was baptized. He was actually baptized by John the Baptist. That's how old he is. But let me just say this. And by the way, thank you guys for being here, and even those that had left. And I want to also give a quick shout out to those who are in the chats who also have channels, who have a Christian channel as well. So give me a second. But I want to say this. And obviously we disagree. And so this is me wrapping up. I think there is a difference between a tragedy that happens, such as a child born and then dies from hunger or starvation, things like that. I think there's a difference between a tragedy happened where we didn't cause it versus a tragedy that we actually intentionally go out and cause, us actually killing the baby and promoting it and not trying to protect it. But I think what's going to end up happening, I'm not a prophet, but I believe this is going to happen as it relates to immigration. I asked this question. I think it ought to be the number one question. I think it's the question that should have been asked at the debate. I think every person should ask, every news reporter or columnist should ask this question: how many terrorists are here? Because the one thing that we saw that galvanized this country was when they hit those buildings on 9/11, hit Washington D.C. and that field in Pennsylvania. We don't know. And that's the answer. How many terrorists are here? We have no idea. I can promise you this: the first time that a terrorist strikes here in this country, we know that we've caught some people on the terrorist watch list. What about those that haven't been caught? The first time something's going to happen, we're going to look back and say, you know what? How'd they get here? Well, they came through that particular border and we didn't do anything about it because we wanted to be welcoming and having open arms. We have to also be wise. 13,000 convicted murderers that we know of are here in this country illegally. 100,000 deaths by fentanyl that comes across that border here in America, and we don't do anything about it. 180 countries are represented by people that have crossed that border. So we're not talking about just Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela. We're talking about 180 countries. That means the other hemisphere are also here. And so I would say this, as it relates to us and our immigration policy, I think we have to be wise in terms of how we deal with what comes here because people are literally dying. We have a squeezed economy. If you want to offer health care to everyone, but you offer more people a bigger pie, or more people have to take from that ever shrinking pie, that's a problem. I don't think that it is up to us to take care of everyone that comes, because if that's the case, everyone will come. We are the one country that constantly has a net positive in immigration rate. A lot of the countries, they may drop in terms of immigration. More folks might leave that country than come to that country, not here with us. Everyone wants to come, and I understand that. We have a wonderful country, as flawed as it is, and I think it's up to us to protect it. I don't think that we ought to have people that come here who want us to be Mexico or want us to be China or want us to be Spain or any other country. This is America, flaws and all. Just like you Californians, we don't want you here in Texas. Stay there. We want to keep Texas, Texas. Or if you come, be like you are in Texas. That's why we don't want Walter Jones down here in Texas. He's got too much Illinois in him. That's why we don't want Nick and Ryan here. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But the point is, all of that being said, I think it is incumbent upon all of us to be educated voters, but even more so, educated Christians. And what was stated by everyone is that where we can affect something, let's do it. Whatever your convictions are, do it. But make sure that you are guided by the principles that you find in the Bible. Whatever you think about someone, let it be dictated and guided by what you saw, how God thought about it. If God thinks this way, then you think that way. Now, obviously, everything won't be covered. We think that character matters. We don't have candidates with great character. Not Donald Trump, not Kamala Harris, neither one of them. And so what do we do? Well, as Damon says, as Walter says, as Alon says, and excuse me, as everyone has says, including Ryan has said, we ought to represent Christ to the fullest. And the likelihood of our country changing course by this election, that ain't gonna happen. We're not gonna all of a sudden, no matter who gets in office, the country is now going to be on an upward trajectory. No, but what we could do is represent Christ. I think Damon said it, represent Christ to the fullest. Let people see you. Again, I think the saddest or the worst indictment that we can have is there are 300,000 churches, some large, some small, some in between, some house churches. And what dent in society have we made? I think the reverse has happened. Too often society has made a dent into us and we act like them. That's why Jesus says, people say, your opinion, I don't care what you think. You ought to care what people think about you. Why? Because Jesus said, let your light so shine that people will see your good works and then glorify God. So people can see you, that you are the godly person. So when you do, yeah, I might want them to deport them. I do. I do want that. But while they're here, if they stay forever, the opportunity that I get to show them love, I will. I will be as godly, first of all, by showing them the gospel. And then two, if I've got something that I can give to them to help them, then amen. I think the problem is that we have a voice that might be loud, but no one cares. Nobody cares what the Christians think. Donald Trump and the Republican Party will take the Christian vote for granted. The Democratic Party totally ignores. That should not be, especially when 60+%, we know they're not all Christian.
Well,
When they believe.
But think about why, Corey. It's because Christians get pimped around cheap talking points. Like
Yeah.
the reality is that most Christians are against abortion, right?
Right.
So if we make that the issue in every conversation, you could see how easy it is for Christians to just get pimped by all somebody's got to do is bring up, I know how to get them on board. Let me just pretend that I'm I'm pro-life, this, that, or the other. Well, good. But it's not a either or, it's a both and. I'm never going to say any of the issues that we've raised on this panel are not important. They're all important to me. I think what's not being done is a lot of Christians don't know how to hold issues in balance. And I think we have to stop. I'm sorry, but I just disagree with this kind of logic that says, well, you know what? I'm not really for one party or the other, and then the but is, but when I look at the Republican Party, they just champion more ideas that are more consistent with Christianity. You may as well be saying that the Republican Party is a Christian party, because at the end of the day, that's what that logic spells out. And that is the heresy. That's the theological heresy.
Well, what I'm saying is, if Christians actually meant what they said and held folks accountable, Republican and Democrat, if we as Christians did our job, abortion wouldn't be an issue. If we as Christians did our job and stood up like we're supposed to and made ourselves understood, transgenderism wouldn't be an issue.
I don't disagree with that. What I am consistently disagreeing with is this notion that somehow republicanism is just more Christian.
No, it's not. It's not.
Right. So even when we make because you can't on one hand deny that neither party is of God and then say, yeah, but one party is a little bit more in line with biblical values, because all that really says logically is one party is more Christian than the other. And for people who keep acting like there's no such thing as Christian nationalism, nationalism in and of itself is not wrong. It's essentially a love and a desire to see your nation succeed. I'm all for that. I think that's wonderful. But when we start syncretizing and merging Christian and nationalist identities,
Right.
that is idolatry. That is not
we are.
biblical.
I think all of us are probably against that. I am. I know you are. I know Sir Walter Jones is. I'm not sure where you stand in line. I believe you guys over at Bible Thinker are probably against it. But I'm saying this: the Republicans are not Christian. The Democratic Party is not Christian. What I'm saying is we are. And so if we ever get tired of what's happening in the country, why don't we just act like we're tired in a biblical sense? That's my only issue. How we speak to each other. We can disagree. I think that you are so wrong, but I love you to death, and you are my brother in Christ. What I think about politics, I feel this way, but I'm still beholden to Christ, and that's who I put my hope in. And I'm saying this, that just like we see some people with some off colored comments in the comment section, again, God is watching. Those comments, they might be deleted by the moderators, but not by heaven. You'll give an account to that. The way that we treat people on the street, you'll give an account to that. The way that you speak about Trump or the way that you speak about Harris, you'll give an account to that. That is, if it's wrong, if it's mean-spirited, the way that you speak. And here, let me just say this is how sad our country is. A comedian gets up at a conference, not a conference, at the rally. He gets up and speak, and everyone's up in arms. Now, there's a reason why he made the comment about garbage and Puerto Rico. Here's the sad part, though. Here's the sad part. It becomes something political because of the election. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and it just took that for Biden yesterday to offer billions of dollars to help clean up the issue that they should have been doing under Trump and Biden. They don't need, neither party really cares about people, but when they can make a political point. What I'm saying is, what if we as Christians did it ourselves? What if the issues that we care about, that we let folks know about it, we vote about that, and if you're a Republican and you say you're for this, and you're pimping our Christian views, and you don't hold fast to that, well, then you got to go. If you're a Democrat and you want to show up in our churches, but then turn around and support the things that we don't support, you got to go. No one respects Christians. Here's who doesn't respect Christians: those who aren't even political, those on the streets. How do I know? Because more people would see how we got it easy, how we got it good in our lives, how we going through things, but we've got this joy. You would think they would come running to that. They don't. Why? Because most of us are all taught.
I agree with you 100%, Corey. My only argument is this: it's like people in the chat are funny. I think a lot of them are just part of the cult. All I've been saying is that Christians ought to have biblical attitudes about politics, about government, about voting. All I have been saying is that the Republican Party is not of God, and neither is the Democratic Party. All I have been saying is that Christians can vote in very nuanced ways, and who they vote for doesn't determine that they are Christians. And so all I have been saying is that if I am a Christian and I vote for this candidate or that candidate, that doesn't determine whether or not I am a Christian. And so again, this whole universal idea that to be a Christian in America and to vote means to vote for the Republican Party is erroneous. And the same way for the Democratic Party. I'm not caping for either one of them. But it seems more in Christian conversation that the idea tends more towards this notion that to be a Christian in America and to vote means to vote Republican. I am standing against that idea.
Okay.
I am saying that Christians can care about a number of issues, and and it's not right to stonewall anybody into just the two. If somebody says abortion is my top issue, fine, good for you, but you can't universally say that
Right.
that is a top issue for every Christian.
For all of them.
I am calling that out as wrong. I am
Yes.
being consistent in the conversation that I'm having. The interesting thing is that I'm not caped for any candidate. I'm not caped for any party. I have been talking about Bible and Christianity most of the time. I wonder who a lot of these folk in the chat really serve, because most of their conversation is really not about Jesus. It's really more about Trump. And what I am trying to expose is this idolatrous underbelly that a lot of them have been so blinded to, that which causes them, which skewers the way that they approach these kinds of conversations. And so immediately when it doesn't sound like their talking points, then you get demonized or categorized as some sort of liberal, some uninformed person, or this, that, or the other. But the reality is that a lot of Christians are not being very biblically minded in the way that they think in nuanced and balanced ways about these things. Vote for whoever you want to vote for, but categorizing Christians and saying, I don't know how you could be a Christian. And that's not a straw man, because I hear that every single day. I don't know how this one could be a Christian if they're voting for this one. I don't know how they could be. I'm not straw manning. I'm not gaslighting. I'm saying this is the conversation all day long, every day, and every election cycle. This is not new to us.
So we should. So
yeah.
We make sure we represent Christ. We make sure that we don't try to get into the heart of people. We can, hey, listen, I think that you were wrong for you supporting this candidate. I think you were wrong. I think you, because in 2 weeks we'll be on to something else. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say this. Matter of fact, I have to push the button on this, because whether you think a person is wrong for their vote or wrong for what they did or whatever, let's just remember this.
You can be saved and stupid. Tweet that. You can be saved and stupid.
So it's possible, ladies and gentlemen, it's possible that someone doesn't think or feel the same way you feel and still be saved. They can vote for, I've never been one of those ones that say that if you vote Democrat, you're not saved. I will never say that. I'll never say that if you vote for Trump, you're not saved. I think that there are some people who are immature in the faith. There are some people that are mature. There are some that think they're mature and not. There are some people that are knowledgeable. There's some that are not. And so let's just do this, because we need to wrap up. I didn't realize we were going to go 3 hours. I did not. And I blame all of you guys. I blame every last one of you guys. Alon has not stopped talking. He won't hush up. He just yapping. But thank you guys so much. Matter of fact, I need to do this. I need to speak to the people, two people. One, all of the people that are here that represent a channel. Obviously, you guys, you all, if you haven't done so, I do recommend that you go to Damon's channel and subscribe. I wish Damon would do more videos. Damon, I don't know what his deal is. He don't do enough videos. Make sure you go to Sir Walter Jones' channel and subscribe. Go to Bible Dingers and subscribe. There's some other folks in the chat that I also want to speak on. Go to their channel and subscribe. All Things Theology. I recommend this brother here. I've never had the chance to meet him, but I do watch his stuff. This is Rock Lee. Is that really his name? Rock. That's his name, man. That's a made up name. That ain't that's a made up name. That's a nice name. And he's got a good voice, which bothers me. But he's got love his channel. Make sure you go and check it out. Dre Day for Christ. I don't know why he ain't making content. Doggone it, but there's Dre Day for Christ. What'd you say?
He stopped making it for some reason.
He stopped making it. I don't know. Caldwell Apologetics. Make sure you check them out. Also, my sister, she didn't really promote it that much, but I do. That is Dinah Reviews. Our sister Dinah. Go and check, because she gives these nuggets, and she's not trying to be a YouTuber or anything like that or whatever. But I say make sure you go check her out. Also, this brother with this beautiful Puerto Rican bald head, John Clash. Go and check him out. Now, I don't know anyone else that has a channel. Let me know so we can go ahead, and I want folks to know about you guys. But also, thank you so much for you guys that gave the super chat, the Stronger Vessel. I can't read the questions because of lack of time, but I thank you. Pete, don't repeat. That's a nice name. Thank you as well. Anthony Wilson, Roosevelt Robinson, thank you so much. Leontine Hudson, thank you so much, my brother. Eddie, Dre Day, thank you. Rant Man Sam, Holding Down New York. Bible Dingers, I don't know who these guys are. Thank you as well. Sheila, thank you, sister. Sheila was getting charged by YouTube just a comment, and she's still here. I don't know why she stuck around. They were charging just a comment. And LT, thank you so much. I wish you guys. I'm sorry I can't go over you guys' question. I apologize, but we've been here three hours. Yeah. And Alon, how old are you? I'm sorry to ask. How old are you, Alon?
49. Don't remind me.
So he's a youngster. How old are you, Damon?
Young man.
Are you
52?
52. Walter is, well, you know what?
3 years more than that.
Yeah. Listen, Walter knows more presidents than anybody else. He's been around us. Ryan, I know, Ryan, what are you, 30?
I'm 33. I'm the age of our Lord.
30.
All right.
He's 30. He's 33. So the older you get, the more you sit, the more you got to get up after sitting so long.
Yeah,
and so
that's right.
I got to get up and move around. So, guys, thank you all so much.
Hey, Corey,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One last thing. All politics is personal. We all know that all politics is personal, and I do want to respond to Ryan. I think it was Ryan who said that I brought up Trump's war thing. I only brought it up because of the talking points of the people who are voting for him, because he says he's anti-war.
Mm-hmm.
The what about the other side, or about the other side? I know we do a lot of that, but I only brought it up because he said he's anti-war, and I did that to bring up his track record of so-called anti-war, because Obama deported more people than any president in the United States history. You understand? So the Democrats do kill a lot of people. But all politics, again, it is personal, and I thank God that you all didn't take any of these talking points personal. When you have debates like this, people's feelings do get in the way. This is one of the most together debates I've seen since this whole political cycle.
All I gotta say is, I know I'm long-winded. I am. But
not me. I'm shocked.
But somebody told me that Walter was saying that I am more long-winded.
He snitched on me.
Hey, Corey, how do we know that? I was on his show. He brought me on his show, and he talked 95% of the time. Wait a minute. Hey, Corey, his wife was texting and calling him saying, let that boy talk. It was so funny. Let the man talk.
That is true. That is true.
You remember that?
Yeah, listen, let me tell you the truth. I was worried about Nick and Ryan and Alon, that they're not going to be able to get a word in edgewise with us. I'm sorry, they're going to have to get what they can, because so anyway,
of course, we appreciate you for having us on. Thank you for this illustrious panel. And we've all said, here's the thing. At the end of the day, I believe all of these are my brothers in Christ.
Amen.
Regardless of where we may agree or disagree in political ideology. And I just would never be divisive over areas of disagreement. I'm just totally against that. I would be divisive over essential matters of the faith, because unity in the faith is really, really important. But if there's some marginal, non-egregious kind of issue, I'm not in favor of that. And I'm not a soft peddler either. Anybody that knows me, I can be pretty much a hardliner on a lot of different issues. But one thing I do love is the body of Christ. Amen. And the unity, keeping the unity of the body of Christ in the bonds of peace. And so I really appreciate this diverse panel and the spirit in which everybody spoke, even when we disagreed, even when we spoke passionately. It was all in love. It was all intelligent. It was all godly and biblical. That's what I appreciate. Thank you.
Amen. And do not watch Donnie Swaggart show. Don't go over there and watch Donnie Swaggart. Don't do it.
Anyway, and we know God was here because I literally brought on one of the biggest cowboy sycophants, and I'm not going to even go at him because of his Cowboys. I just listen. He's been punished as it is. So anyway, guys, I love you all. God bless you, Lord willing. I hope to see you all again tomorrow. Be blessed.